across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, this is Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. It's been an incredibly busy 24 hours on the international diplomatic front. It's going to be an even busier 24 hours between now and tomorrow evening because that Alaska summit is happening between Putin and Trump. There may well be a second meeting involving Zelensky in the coming days too. We'll take a look back at all of what has happened and we'll find out what the predictions are. Could there be a minerals for land deal? Could there be some sort of West Bank style occupation? What is going to happen, and can, crucially, the people in Ukraine get peace back? We'll talk about that. We'll also talk about the migrant mega dinghy. 107 people coming across the Channel to Britain in one vessel. Also, Robert Jenrick, the Shadow Justice Secretary, says he was ignored by French police after reporting Calais migrants. We'll also talk as well about the fact that there are people in one council area who are being charged more for wider graves. This is a 6-foot wide grave rather than the usual 5-foot wide grave. Why? Because, well, people are wider, because to have a larger grave costs more money, there's more digging involved, it takes up more space, of course, and people are being charged more for it. One group says that it is stigmatising, but how stigmatising is it really when you're dead, when you're there? What about the families as well? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, because Monjaro as well, one of the fat jobs, is going up in price for people who buy it privately. That's another story we're covering today. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call your call in, to get your voice on the air between now and 7 o'clock. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at TalkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a voice note, send me a WhatsApp text message, or give me a ring on that main number 0344 499 1000. Plenty to discuss between now and 7 o'clock. Stay with us here on Talk. Steve's been in touch about graves already. He says 6 feet between graves is perfectly reasonable when you allow for social distancing. Just saying, says Steve. Well, it's actually the width of the grave itself. It's not sort of between the graves, it's the width of the grave itself. Because if you think, I mean, I'm quite a large chap. I'd probably fall into the obese category. So you've got, 5 feet across, as generally works for some people, but of course it has to be 6 for others. Would I be charged more? I don't know. And on the situation in Ukraine, Trump meeting Putin, Gary says, why doesn't Putin give some ownership of his land to Trump on Russia's east coast for minerals or whatever, and in return Ukraine must give up what land Russia occupies, but Trump must help rebuild Ukraine and invest in it over the years and also let Ukraine become part of NATO. Well, what are your ideas on all of that? What would bring peace to Ukraine? Because so many people get criticised, so many leaders get criticised for not talking about peace. I actually think not all of what Trump does I agree with by any stretch of the imagination, but he was one of the first leaders who said we've got to bring peace to Ukraine, and now we're talking about it, and those talks are happening, which I think is some form of progress. It can't be seen as a negative thing before it's even happened. And following a video call with a coalition of the willing other European leaders, our own Prime Minister Keir Starmer shared his thoughts on the upcoming meeting between Presidents Trump and Putin.
This meeting on Friday that President Trump is attending is hugely important. And as I've said personally to President Trump, look, for 3 and a bit years this conflict has been going on and we haven't got anywhere near the prospect of actually a viable solution, a viable way of bringing it to a ceasefire. And now we do have that chance because of the work that the President has put in. And as a result of the announcement that the meeting was going to take place in Alaska, we've had our national security advisors in Chevening in the UK, and I'm really pleased that Vice President Vance is on the call here, because of course he was integral to the discussions that went on quite intensely last weekend in terms of the thinking, the shaping and the trying to make a success of what happens on Friday. So Vice President Vance, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for the work that you put in relation to this alongside our NSAs.
Sir Keir Starmer there referring to the national security advisors there at the end. And shortly after that, Donald Trump, the US president, spoke about the likelihood of a meeting between Putin and Zelensky to end the war.
I thought it was very respectful that the president of Russia is coming to our country. But I think we'll have constructive conversation. I get along with Zelensky, but, you know, I disagree with what he's done. Very, very severely disagree. This is a war that should have never happened, wouldn't have happened. The next meeting will be with Zelensky and Putin, or Zelensky and Putin and me. I'll be there if they need, but I want to have a meeting set up between the two leaders. I was a little bothered by the fact that Zelensky was saying, well, I have to get constitutional approval. I mean, he's got approval to go into war and kill everybody. Now, I may leave and say, good luck, and that'll be the end. I may say this is not going to be settled. I think if it weren't for me, he would not be even talking to anybody else right now. I may say, lots of luck, keep fighting, or I may say we can make a deal.
If not,
I will tell you this, I've seen a poll coming out of Ukraine. 88% of the people would like to see a deal made. And if you go back 3 years, everybody was gung-ho for war. You know, everybody's gung-ho for war until you have it.
Apologies, just a few gremlins in the system there, but actually that was a clip from Monday. But the line is basically the same from Trump. He's talking, of course, about a possible second meeting, about Zelensky and Putin perhaps meeting. He said he'd be there if he needed to be there, and we'll make sure that we bring you the very latest on that. It'll be really interesting to see what happens in Alaska. It's actually tomorrow night around 8:30 our time. And in the last few hours, the Russian President Vladimir Putin, he's praised Donald Trump for his efforts to find a resolution to the conflict. It's really quite striking, actually, in all of this, how warm the language is, how Zelensky, who previously, of course, has been very critical of Trump, there was that very, very awkward meeting in the Oval Office, how the three leaders, Putin, Zelensky, Trump and others in the coalition of the willing, like Keir Starmer, are all speaking very warmly. I think they want this to work. So this is what Putin has been saying.
Который, как всем хорошо известно, предпринимает.
And secondly, I will tell you about the stage we are at with the current American administration, which, as everyone knows, is making, in my opinion, quite energetic and sincere efforts to stop the hostilities, stop the crisis and reach agreements that are of interest to all parties involved in this conflict, in order to create long-term conditions for peace, both between our countries and in Europe, and in the world as a whole. If, at the next stage, we reach agreements in the area of control over strategic offensive weapons.
Well, that's Vladimir Putin there. Obviously, you heard the words of a translator there in terms of what he is saying. So all of this seems to be pointing largely in the right direction. How cynical should we be about this, though? How much should we worry about the possible outcomes here and the fact it's happening in the first place? Well, sure, Gerald Howarth is a former Conservative Defence Minister and joins me now. Gerald, thank you for your time today. Do you share the optimism that these leaders apparently share? This cautious optimism, but optimism nonetheless.
I do not know what on earth the basis for such optimism can possibly be. You said a moment ago that it was looking like it was pointing in the right direction. No, it's not. Putin has got President Trump wrapped around his little finger. He knows how to flatter President Trump, and President Trump likes being flattered. His talk of doing a deal, I think, is just so outrageous. It is both venal and puerile. This is not the language of international diplomacy between two countries which have their fingers on the nuclear button. This is childish stuff. This is very, very serious indeed. And what we have is a president of the United States who has been utterly disgraceful towards President Zelensky. The treatment he gave him at the White House was disreputable. He has been favorably impressed with President Putin, who is the aggressor, the brutal aggressor in this. And it is astonishing that the President of the United States, whose predecessor, President Bill Clinton, signed the Budapest Memorandum in 1995, under which Ukraine's existing borders were to be respected and its sovereignty respected as well. And now the President of the United States seemed to want to do some grubby deal in order to bring about peace, which will mean at least 20% of Ukraine being ceded to the brutal aggressor.
So what should happen? What is an outcome that you believe would be fair?
Well, first and foremost, what will happen is that President Putin knows exactly where he stands. He has got 20% of Ukraine. He wants the lot. He made that clear in 2021 in the speech he made, that he's trying to rebuild the sovereignty. Believes that Ukraine never existed as an independent nation and should be part of Russia. So he will not stop here. And if we appease him here, as we appeased him over the annexation of Crimea, as we appeased him in Georgia in 2008, the result will be that he will look for somewhere else, possibly even testing the resolve of NATO to implement Article 5. So he might go for a Baltic state, a little incursion somewhere.
Is that really realistic, given that over the course of the 3.5 years, apart from a feint towards Kyiv, all that he has done is take a fifth of Ukraine? Yes, that's a large area, but there is a lot of speculation that he would move into a NATO country. He's shown no intention of doing that.
No, of course he hasn't. He doesn't need to. He's winning at the moment. He's got 20%.
But does he have the capability to do so, or the desire to do so?
Oh, he clearly has the desire. That was set out in his speech in July 2021. Don't know what our diplomats were doing on either side of the Atlantic, but they didn't seem to take any note.
But if he can't take all of Ukraine, as he thought he would, if he can only take a fifth of Ukraine after 3.5 years, where is the evidence of the ability, the ability militarily to take a NATO country and the absolute, huge consequences of that were Article 5 to be triggered?
And of course, but he will calculate that Article 5 will not be triggered, because nobody has any appetite to trigger Article 5, which of course was only triggered on one occasion, and that was in support of the United States of America when they were attacked at the
9/11. Yes, that's right.
9/11. So it seems to me that it is absolutely crystal clear what should happen, what will not happen, is that President Trump should tell Putin in no uncertain terms that his country is guilty of the most brutal aggressions. It is already been arraigned at the International Criminal Court in The Hague, that he is guilty of abducting children from a sovereign state and shipping them to Russia, that he's bombed civilian enclaves, that he's in complete breach of an agreement his predecessor signed, and unless he retreats, we shall provide Ukraine with every conceivable military bit of kit that we can assemble.
But haven't we largely been doing that? Haven't we largely been doing that for the last 3.5 years?
No, we haven't. Unfortunately, Peter, we have not.
So your solution to this is to escalate the war? Yes,
absolutely. It has to be, because if you do not match him now, we gave him a green light in 2008. We've given him a green light when he annexed Crimea in 2014. What will happen now is, if we give him another green light, and if President Trump done some grubby deal by which he gets some minerals in return for ceding another country's land, that will be equally disgraceful.
But surely that would just elongate the war. More people would be killed. 88% of the Ukrainian population wants some form of deal to be done for peace.
Well, that is a questionable statistic. I've been to Ukraine. I was chairman of the All-Party Ukraine group in Parliament 10 years ago. I have been to Ukraine twice in the last couple of months, and the people there are absolutely determined to try and hold their land, but they need help. They need our help.
So do they feel they're being sold out by the West then?
Yes, of course they do. Of course they do. They need weapons. And at a conference I was at, organised by Lord Ashcroft in Odessa at the end of May, Mike Pompeo, former Secretary of State, i.e. Foreign Secretary of the United States under the last Trump administration, he said we need to give Ukraine more weapons. Biden was slow. The Republicans, our sister party as far as the Conservative Party is concerned, our sister party in the United States, was reluctant to support the Biden initiative to ship weapons to Ukraine.
So
everything was done too slow and too little.
So why is Zelensky now not saying what you're saying, do you think?
Because he doesn't want to offend President Trump, who will just simply be rude to him.
He's done it on numerous occasions previously, most notably in the Oval Office. Why is his mind being changed more recently, do you think?
Why is Zelensky's mind being changed?
Yes.
I don't think his mind has been changed. It's just a question of how you deal with this maverick president.
Well, he's engaging in the process. He's saying that he wants peace. He appears to be open to some sort of meeting with Putin. That's not the same as what you're arguing for.
Well, I'm not speaking for President Zelensky.
No, I know you're not. What I'm saying is that were Zelensky of the mind to increase the weapons, to increase the war, to escalate the conflict, he wouldn't be doing what he's doing now, would he?
Well, he cannot offend his principal supplier of equipment, who withheld equipment earlier in his presidency, who failed to support President Biden when he put through the $66 billion package. Eventually, it did go through. But all that delay just helped give Putin time to undertake his brutal aggression on the Ukrainians. So President Zelensky, like our own Prime Minister, I mean, don't forget, every Labour cabinet minister had nothing good to say about President Trump. What are they doing now? Well, they're going fishing with Trump's men, having a jolly good time with them. I don't criticize them for that. This is a president who is such a maverick, who is so unbelievably naive when it comes to international affairs, who is completely unpredictable.
Do you think Trump can be trusted at all?
No, I don't think so, and I'm afraid not. And I've said that to some American friends of mine who feel slightly offended at that, because they feel that they can be trusted. But Peter, there is another aspect to this. If some sort of grubby deal is done, apparently there will be security guarantees. What are those security guarantees? You cannot trust a word that Putin
Well, it's a big question about what those security guarantees are actually worth, because they're not guarantees, because guarantees have been given in the past. Just finally, Gerald, I just wonder if these talks fail. Trump has said, he doesn't really want to talk about the consequences, but there would be bad consequences. Is perhaps, I don't want to be conspiratorial about this, but is Zelensky's perhaps gamble here saying go along with the process, see that Putin doesn't do what Trump wants him to do, and then Trump will be the guarantor and will give the weapons to escalate the conflict? Is that what you think might happen?
Well, it's what I'd like to think might happen, but you can't tell, and I am deeply pessimistic, and I cannot tell exactly what is going to happen out of this, because you cannot predict anything that might say or might do. So let us hope that all that he's been saying, all the criticism of Zelensky and the sucking up to Putin, transforms itself into some sort of statesmanship whereby he stands up to an international aggressor and assures him that the security guarantee will be the security guarantee, i.e. it will be Ukrainian membership of NATO.
Okay, Sir Gerald, thank you very much. That's Sir Gerald Howarth there, former Conservative Defence Minister. What do you think about what he's saying there? Would a deal with Putin just give him the green light to attack any other country, even us, a NATO country? I largely disagree with what Sir Gerald Howarth was saying there, but I think he made the points in a very intelligent way, and it's always interesting. I learned a lot from that interview. I don't know about you. Margaret in Birmingham's been in touch and says, why don't people give Donald Trump some credit? He's trying to put an end to war. Let's hope tomorrow in Alaska will bring peace to Ukraine and Russia, says Margaret. I believe exactly what you believe, Margaret, and I think that I disagree with a lot of what Trump does, but he's trying to find an end to the war here. I don't think he's got by the short and curlies by Putin in the same way that many people, and including I think Sir Gerald Howarth, do. I don't think that is exactly how things are. I do think he wants an end to this conflict because he is, by his own admission, someone who favours peace rather than war. Perhaps your guest could answer why Biden didn't try for peace, says Jane. And Jane, I think that's a very fair point. Maybe I should have asked that, but I think the point is that Biden simply said you've got to defeat Putin. That was his mantra. That is perhaps where Trump will get to. We'll see what happens. Stuart in Wigan, just finally before the break, says, spare me if I don't care for the opinions of UK politicians who are happy to see Ukraine's remaining fighting-age men wiped out. The reality is Ukraine cannot win this war, and NATO were not prepared to get involved. It's utterly ridiculous to suggest Russia could take on a NATO country. These politicians are gaslighting us, says Stuart in Wigan. I suppose the point is as well, Stuart, that Sir Gerald was essentially saying that even if a NATO country was targeted by Russia, he doesn't think that idea of, you attack one NATO country, you attack them all, and then, hellfire is rained down upon you. He doesn't think that mechanism, it's called Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization's treaty, the treaty itself, would be triggered. It's only been triggered once before, and that was after 9/11. 9/11. So NATO, of course, has existed for what, 5, 6 decades, whatever it is, and it's only been triggered once. Really interesting debate. Let me know your thoughts on everything that's been said. 0344 499 1000. And if you disagree with me, that's absolutely fine, because on our programme we disagree without being disagreeable. And Sir Gerald and I disagreed there, but we did so, I hope, in a reasonable way. We'll talk in a second about the migrant mega dinghy, a huge inflatable bringing a record 107 people across the channel. Also, whether Robert Jenrick, the Shadow Justice Secretary, was ignored by French police after reporting Calais migrants. Stay with us for that.
And if you haven't quite got the right grades to get into that university, then maybe it isn't the right one for you. But, you know, first of all, we need to congratulate these young people who have worked absolutely solidly. We need to congratulate the teachers, the support staff, but most of all, the parents who have had to put up with these young, stressed out people, you know, waiting for these results.
Well done, us.
Absolutely, well done, us. And I don't think it was that long ago, Julia, that we would have been receiving our results. So, you know, we can kind of think back to that kind of moment of joy.
Quite a way back for me.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, lots of reaction to what Sir Gerald Howarth was saying there. Thank you to Tad in Cambridge, who has said, "Afternoon, Peter. Donald Trump's book, The Art of the Deal, gives us a fantastic insight as to the way Donald Trump's mind works. He's the consummate poker player. So I have to say, people like Howarth, who condemn him before the negotiations properly get underway, they really do underestimate President Trump. I'm not sure of Howarth's motives, but I'll be kind and say I think he's wrong. Trump is Ukraine's last best chance of peace," says Tad. Simon in West Sussex says, "I welcome peace talks 100%, but how many green lights can the West give Putin?" I think that's a very fair point, Simon. Jane says, "Unfortunately, the likes of President Trump clouds too many... Unfortunately, the dislike of President Trump clouds too many people. They have so much effort into Ukraine too. It is losing their own argument they're worried about. The truth doesn't seem to matter." Jane, you're absolutely right, and I do think that so many people lose their critical thinking. They just decide Donald Trump is always wrong, no matter what he does, no matter what his plan is, it's always wrong. Similarly, I think people have that with Israel, where there is a nuance there. There is definitely some form of, the truth is always somewhere in the middle, and I think we need to just be very, very careful and actually engage our critical faculties, which is what we're going to do with the next story in regard to Robert Jenrick. And earlier, the Shadow Justice Secretary joined Mike Graham on Morning Glory to discuss his experience at the migrant camps in northern France. He's been there in the last few days. This is what he told Mike this morning.
Look, the camps that exist in northern France are lawless places.
Yeah.
There's no sign of the police whatsoever.
Right.
They're essentially run by gangsters, and it is mostly young men in those camps. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
It's not what the lefty Open Borders Brigade say. Most people speak poor English.
Yeah.
I ask people what their skills are, what their professions are. Most people don't have anything to contribute to this country. These are people who, when they get here, are going to be a massive drag on the British taxpayer, diverting resources from Brits who are truly in need. And there are obviously very dangerous people in those camps. Several people have been shot dead in the very camp that I went to in the last 6 months. Do you want these people on the streets of our country? I don't.
He also shared a video we're about to watch and listen to now when he was ignored by the French police.
At daybreak, we find the migrants have gone. We don't know where. There's still no sign of any police. So I ring them.
I'm in Dunkirk, and I saw a large group of 40 or 50 illegal migrants in the cemetery off the main road by the beach.
He doesn't think that they are going to come, but he's going to give the information to the police. Then the police will decide.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think the police officer just said that he doesn't think the police will be sent out. We've literally gone to a camp, found a group of migrants holding life jackets, watched them get onto a public bus in plain sight of everyone, then we watched them walk through Dunkirk, and we've given £800 million to France, and we didn't see a police officer the whole day, and now we just phoned them. It doesn't sound they're even going to bother to come out.
Robert Jenrick there, who has been in France in the last few days, as has the Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp, who was threatened with a knife as well. Robert Taylor is a journalist and broadcaster who joins me now. Robert, this reality on the ground that we've seen from these two senior Conservative politicians, it does not in any way fill me with any optimism in regard to getting this sorted. What do you think?
Well, what I think is that we were told by Keir Starmer repeatedly in the last election that he was simply going to smash the gangs. He was going to get rid of the Rwanda scheme, which we know was beginning to work. Even though it hadn't become operational, the message had got through to migrants. The Irish were complaining that the migrants were going to Ireland instead of the UK because of Rwanda. So smash the gangs was just false advertising. And I think we actually possibly owed an apology by the Prime Minister for that statement, because he was pulling the wool over our eyes. And he's done no such thing. We've seen migrant crossings go up something like 40%. No end in sight to this crisis, and yet we were told it's as simple as smash the gangs.
And also we are in a situation where the arrests have gone down, as you say. We're also in a situation in the last 48 hours or so, a huge inflatable, bringing a record number of people across, 107 in one dinghy. The previous record was 98. We were told as well that this, if it was over 80, it was to be outlawed. It should be outlawed anyway. The whole thing should be outlawed. Do you feel there's anything that the government has announced or is doing, the one in, one out, which is actually 20 in and 1 out? What do you make of their huge flurry of policies over the last couple of weeks?
Well, the one in, well, it's 20 in, 1 out, as you say. That has made it worse, because I think what it shows to the migrants is we're just a soft touch. We're not serious about this. And all this sort of, welcome migrant stuff that you get from the left in this country is just making it worse. It's encouraging them. They know they're going to get a great welcome when they come here. They're going to stay in nice hotels. They're going to be put up. They're not going to be sent back to France or anywhere else. They're certainly not going to be sent to Rwanda. There is a huge incentive for them to make that horrible crossing. And by the way, I might just add, Peter, that those who are in favour of welcoming channel migrants into the UK and giving them this great hospitality. I wonder how they feel when a boat capsizes and you get some of them drowning. I reckon they've got blood on their hands.
I mean, I think, you know, we don't want anybody losing their life or taking this huge risk that they do, but people do. They for whatever reason, feel they have to. And of course, the mechanisms and the way in which people are treated in this country, they know they'll get benefits, they know they'll be put up in nice hotels, they know that they'll be processed to some degree. I mean, I'm just not convinced with the human rights law and many other aspects of this that we'll see any of those migrants who have come across being sent back to France in the one-in, one-out scheme. Okay, it's only operational, maybe we should give it a bit of a try, but surely there are just going to be many attempts to stop that happening from legal experts and those who say that it's contrary to various bits of law and human rights obligations.
Exactly right, Peter. And I think one in, one out could actually work in theory. If everyone who comes across the channel knows that they're going to be sent back to France, then clearly they won't make that journey. But the trouble is, we know that it's one out and 17 in. We know that it's just going to be about 50 a week, and I don't know how that's going by. Have any gone yet? So there is no disincentive to stop these people coming across. And when there's no disincentive, you cannot stop them. You cannot smash the gangs. It really is as simple as that.
Robert, thank you. That's Robert Taylor there, the journalist and broadcaster. In fairness to the government, it's only been a week since they sent those pictures out of people arriving and being processed, so maybe it'll take a while, certainly, to get them back to France. But I'm very sceptical, I know my colleague Kevin O'Sullivan is too, in regard to how many people in the one-in, one-out scheme, as it's so called, we know that's not factually accurate, how many of them will actually go back to France. 0344 499 1000 for your opinion on this. Another Cliff in well, I'll read that in a second. Dave in Leicestershire says 107 in one dinghy. It's only a matter of time before the gang leaders get hold of bigger boats, especially knowing they will not be stopped, maybe 600 or 700 at a time. Is the government really not seeing what's happening? It makes your blood boil. Great show as always, says Dave in Leicestershire. Thank you for your message there. Martin in Whitley Bay says Putin's got no interest in ending the war. Doing so opens the door to Ukraine, not in conflict, joining NATO. The Alaska conference is nothing but window dressing. Starmer's Zelensky stunt. The poor man is asking for help from a paper tiger. Nothing will change till Putin gets what he wants, says Martin. Don says, he says there are ongoing debates about mineral extraction in Alaska. Trump has already overturned a ban imposed by Biden. Goodness knows what would happen if it is opened up for the benefit of Russia. Barry says, I wonder how many billions that hug Starmer gave Zelensky will cost the UK taxpayer. Another person says, I'm always uncomfortable when people like Sir Gerald Harth advocate stepping up the war in Ukraine. No regard for other people's lives. Disgraceful, says Don. Well, I'm sure Sir Gerald would argue that actually if you defeat Russia now, well, maybe you're in a better position in the longer term, because what he was arguing there anyway was that Putin would see this as a green light to attack other NATO countries. And Cliff in Berkshire has got in touch about this story about widening, wider coffins needing wider graves. This is something I'm going to talk about a little bit later on. And Cliff says, would a short person get a discount on the cost of a grave? I don't know the answer, but yes, I wonder if you are perhaps a short person, maybe you have a view on that. Maybe you should get a discount, or maybe you don't care because you'll be dead. We're going to talk in just a second about another matter which involves people's weight, which is the King Kong fat jab Mounjaro. It's almost going to triple in price from September, adding a potential £2,704 a year to the cost of the drug. Lots of people are taking it, lots of people are losing an awful lot of weight, but is it safe? That's another big question. You lose muscle mass as well as weight, and getting that muscle mass back can be very, very difficult. We're going to talk to a GP about that in just a second. Stay with us.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Mike in Lincoln, who says, I believe that just as the Starmer government are looking to reward Hamas for the disgusting invasion and pogrom on the 7th of October by recognising Palestine, in inverted commas, Trump is looking to reward Putin for his aggression and invasion of Ukraine by giving him the lands he's conquered. Both are deeply wrong and will only lead to more atrocities on both fronts. These actions are both going to lead to bad consequences for the Western world. Thank you, Mike in Lincoln. Mick says the peace talks are like a soap opera, a fantasist desperate for a Nobel Peace Prize, an evil murdering dictator, a victim of oppression, and a UK Prime Minister whose nose is out of joint. Innocent lies are of no consequence. Gary in Bolden says, Sir Gerald Harth talking ill of Trump, but I'd swap him for our Prime Minister any day. Well, another thing people are swapping is food for jabs. This is Mounjaro. It's going to almost triple in cost from September, adding a potential £2,704 a year to the cost of the drug. There are clearly lots of celebrities on it. Just look at the many collapsing faces. Just as their faces are collapsing, the price is increasing. As waistlines go down, the cost goes up. An annual cost of the annual cost of the 15 milligram dose will increase from £1,586 a year to £4,290 a year. This is if you get I think you can perhaps still hear me. I think we had a slight audio problem there just for about 5 seconds there, but just to say that the annual cost of the 15 milligram dose of Mounjaro is going to increase from £1,586 a year to £4,290. If you get it privately, that cost is going to go up, as many people do, but if you get it on the NHS, the price to the NHS doesn't look as if it's going to change. Well, let's speak to Dr. Lawrence Gerlis, GP, a same-day doctor. Is this simply capitalism, Lawrence? They've got the country hooked and now they're increasing the price?
Yes, I mean, pharmaceutical companies are commercial enterprises. I've spent many years in the industry, and indeed I worked for Novo, before it was Novo Nordisk, on their insulin. Pharma companies come in for a lot of criticism. They're not evil. They're there to try to make a profit out of making people better. They're not, they don't set out to make people unwell. But this is a complex issue, so if you can bear with me, prices for drugs vary enormously around the world. The drug companies will charge what they can in each locality, in each country. So, for example, in the United States, I have patients coming over for Mounjaro paying about £120 in the UK, and they tell me they're paying $1,000 in the USA for the same medication. Insulin in the US, $300 a vial, about £10 over here. So what the companies do is negotiate with each regulatory body internationally what they can charge. In the US, the insurance companies pick up the tab for those lucky enough to have insurance. For those without insurance, they try to buy it cheaply from Canada or get cheaper generics. But it's a very complex issue. It's not like cars, which may vary a little bit from one country to another. There's enormous variation in the price of drugs. And yes, what's happened now is that Senator Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, has picked up on this. He wants to lower drug prices in the USA. So the drug companies are saying, well, hold on, we're going to have to increase the prices elsewhere to match. And that's what Eli Lilly are planning to do with Mounjaro.
Eli Lilly is the company that is involved here.
Yeah.
What do you think about the safety of the drug itself? Because there are many people saying that this wonder drug you may well lose weight, but you also lose muscle mass as well, and there may well be a lot of side effects that many people experience in some ways, but the long-term implications of these kind of drugs isn't known.
Yeah, look, they're very effective. There's no doubt about that. Obesity is very serious. Obesity has a lot of health problems, heart disease, cancers, and so on. This is the first effective drug for obesity we've had for a long time. Nothing is 100% safe. If you take an aspirin or a paracetamol, it's going to have side effects. The way I handle prescriptions for this medication is not to give it continuously. I advise people to have a break. I don't like it when people come over from the USA who are basically addicted to it. They've lost all the weight. They're very skinny, but they're still on the medication. And that worries me more than anything. As you say, it's long-term use that is a problem. Some people get short-term side effects, nausea, because that's the way the drug works. It reduces your appetite. By and large, it's well tolerated. But as I say, nothing is 100% safe.
Do you think that it's too much of an issue in our society simply to reach for a pill, reach for a medication, rather than trying to do exercise and willpower?
Well, yes. Having said that, I've tried diets, and like most people, you give up after 2 weeks. And most diets, even if they work, you put the weight back on. So I think for seriously obese people, this is a godsend. I think it has helped a lot of people. This is a useful medication. Let's not throw it all out. But on the other hand, I'm always a bit suspicious of drugs. Personally, I get every side effect of every medication, so I would not be inclined to take this type of medication. But I know people that take it without any problems at all. So I think the jury is still out. We just have to wait and see what the long-term side effects might be.
But if the jury's still out on the long-term side effects and you're wondering what they might be, as is the rest of the medical community, I mean, people taking it may be storing up many health problems for the future.
It's true. I've seen people's pancreatic enzymes. You can get pancreatitis, an inflammation of the pancreas, which can be serious. We measure their enzymes, and you see the enzymes going up. And I say to people, you've got to take a break from this medication. There are also other questions. I had one patient that was really quite unwell after the first injection. So there's nothing. You don't get anything for nothing in medicine, and the same with pharmaceuticals. I think if you have to balance the risk of serious obesity against the risk of medication. And that's why I would rather these drugs were not lifestyle drugs used by fit, relatively slim people. People are buying it, by the way, over the counter or online without a doctor consultation at all. And that worries me.
Surely that's a failure of regulation, Lawrence.
Yeah, well, it is. And it frightens me. Since the pandemic, we've had a lot of companies setting up doing remote consultations, and now they're doing remote consultations and prescriptions for drugs like Ozempic and Mounjaro, and even pharmacies selling it with a remote consultation. That worries me enormously, and I agree with you. I think that needs to be regulated. I know that Novo Nordisk are trying to crack down on some of the generic copies that are being sold in the USA, and it's a bit of the Wild West out there, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I know as well of people who have they've been denied in the first consultation, and then they've just gone to another. They just sort of keep going to the consultations until they get someone who'll prescribe it to them. Lawrence, thank you. That's Dr. Lawrence Garlis there, GP at Same Day Doctor. Appreciate his contribution to the show. Karen in Bournemouth has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000 in regard to the Ukraine situation. A lot of people sending us messages and giving us phone calls about this today. Karen, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say on this?
Oh, thanks. Hi, Peter.
Hi there.
My thinking is that the first mistake that was made in this war was when they supplied Ukraine with arms. They put conditions on it not to be used on Russian soil, and there was a lack of aircraft, and they couldn't use it.
Do you think they should have been able to use it on Russian soil?
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to end a war, you got to fight the other side, and the other side was Russia. So,
although they were in Ukraine at the time, though, was that safeguard about Ukraine not expanding?
I don't think so. No, I think that was just Biden, and his pals trying to keep control of the situation. The other thing that I think as well is that Starmer's actually. He couldn't really care that much about Zelensky. He's using Zelensky for his own ends, to make it look like he's up for democracy and all of that stuff. Because the last time they came close to talking, Putin and Ukraine, Starmer immediately piped up about, we'll put peacekeepers along the border, which he knew would annoy Putin no end. So that all went pear-shaped.
What do you think happens tomorrow, Karen?
I think there'll be a lot of talk, but I think I don't think if Zelensky is planning to take Starmer's advice, he'll be carrying on anyway. He won't allow the land to be taken. And Starmer will say, you know, we'll support you and do that no matter what.
Okay.
But in actual fact, he's already, on occasion, you know, the arms that were promised didn't arrive.
Interesting thoughts there, Karen. Thank you for them. That's Karen in Bournemouth there. Karen, give me a ring on 0344 499 1000. You can do that as well. We're going to talk to Mark Littlewood in a second, the director of the Popcons, Popular Conservatism, about Trump's administration slamming Britain for serious restrictions on free speech over the past year, and an anti-abortion campaigner supported by the White House who's been cleared over her silent prayer outside an abortion clinic. Stay with us here on Talk.
And if you haven't quite got the right grades to get into that university, then maybe it isn't the right one for you. But, you know, first of all, we need to congratulate these young people who have worked absolutely solidly. We need to congratulate the teachers, the support staff, but most of all the parents who have had to put up with these young, stressed out people, you know, waiting for these results.
Well done, us.
Absolutely, well done, us. And I don't think it was that long ago, Julia, that we would have been receiving our results. So, you know, we can kind of think back to that kind of moment of joy.
Quite a way back for me.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
We were talking about, and indeed played a clip about Robert Jenrick and his views on migration, his trip to France. He's just back. He spoke to Mike this morning, and Pete has sent us a voice note on this. You can do this too. Dead easy to send a voice note on 0344 499 1000. This is what Pete thinks.
Do you know this Robert Jenrick stuff? I mean, they started all this. You know, they started all the contracts with hotels and that. It absolutely boils my blood to see them, you know, walking around France and like whistleblowing now, mate. It should have been done 7-8 years ago. It doesn't interest me one little bit, mate.
Pete, thanks for your thoughts on that. Well, Robert Jenrick himself spoke to Mike Graham on Morning Glory about all sorts of different issues. One of them is about freedom of speech, which we're going to talk about now. The Trump administration has slammed Britain for serious restrictions on freedom of speech and human rights. This is what Robert Jenrick told Mike Graham this morning on Morning Glory.
I'm very worried about freedom of speech in our own country, as across the West, as is JD Vance, and I think he's been absolutely right on this issue. I think he did a brilliant speech in Munich.
Did you talk about
earlier
that?
in the year? Yeah, it was one of the topics that came up. And one of the things that I'm particularly worried about now is the Labour government's attempt to create a legal definition of Islamophobia.
Right.
which I think is going to make it very difficult
still
for people.
trying to do that?
They are taking that forward, and that's going to make it very hard to have an honest debate about radical Islam, which I'm really concerned about. We already have a massive problem in this country with hate preachers, with anti-Semitism, and if we get to a point where no one can even mention these things for fear of a knock at the door by the police, then that's a worrying development.
And this is a report by the Trump administration saying Britain has serious restrictions on free speech over the past year, obviously since Keir Starmer took over as Prime Minister. It said human rights situation has worsened in the United Kingdom. Let's speak to Mark Littlewood, Director of Popular Conservatism. Mark, do you agree with this?
Yes, I agree with both Donald Trump and Robert Jenrick, but I think I'd probably go further still. I mean, it's not just Robert mentioned in that clip from Mike Graham's show earlier that he's worried about a definition of Islamophobia, that we might not be able to discuss radical Islam and, you know, the key political issues of the day. But I think we've actually got to get back to freedom of speech being way more extensive than that. It's okay to ridicule religions, to be offensive about religions, to offend people. And what we've done, not just over the last year, I think this has been bubbling up for 10 years or more, is that we have prioritised not causing people offence higher than freedom of expression. So we consider that if what you say might offend somebody, put their nose out of joint, not necessarily cause a crime or any physical pain to them, but just might be off colour or untoward, then you need to be cancelled. This happens in the private sector a lot. I'm more sympathetic to that because I think private sector companies can monitor their own reputation, but it's now becoming a state sector thing. Watch what you say on Twitter, watch what you say about different religions, in particular Islam, which now seems like it might receive essentially preferential treatment under a blasphemy law. This is all wrong. I wish we had the sort of equivalent of America's First Amendment, guaranteeing freedom of speech way beyond offending people or causing people to, you know, be annoyed about what you've said. We've got it all the wrong way round, and freedom of speech is dying a long, slow and strangulated death in Britain.
I wonder if there's a two-tier aspect in this in regard to religion, as you appear to suggest there, Mark, because there are many Christians I know, I'm not a Christian, but I come from a Christian background and I know many Christians, who will say that it's absolutely fine, or seems to be absolutely fine, for all sorts of people, comedians, broadcasters, whoever, to ridicule the Church of England, to say it's, you know, it's sort of pointless, they don't really believe anything, to say that there are all sorts of things that people say about religious people, the God Squad, and I'm not saying that's offensive necessarily, but just that it's almost as if Christianity, maybe even Judaism and other religions are okay to criticise and to ridicule, but actually when it comes to Islam, there are so few people who will ever do that, and we've seen the very real world consequences of that with Charlie Hebdo, for example, in France, when they did cartoons of Muhammad, who in Islam is never meant to be represented in pictorial form.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. So it seems to be a desire, which you can sort of understand at first blush, Peter, to protect minorities. So we sort of take the view, well, Christians are broadly, if not the majority of the country, at least we're sort of majoritarian Christian background, but Muslims, for example, are not, Jews are not. And going back to the Charlie Hebdo cartoons, where, you know, the world's leaders were very keen to go around saying, "Je suis Charlie." Well, no mainstream media outlet in the United Kingdom was willing to republish the cartoons themselves. Why not? And actually over Christianity, we almost sort of fought this battle, going back 30 or 40 years. We used to have blasphemy laws to protect Christianity. No television station was willing to show Monty Python's The Life of Brian until Channel 4 took the risk.
Which kind of seems a bit quaint now, doesn't it?
Yeah, ridiculous. And so that battle having been won, not that I think people should go out of their way to deliberately offend Christians or those who are sort of Christian adjacent in their faith, but part of freedom of speech is to allow ridicule. And this should be across the board. There should be no special favours for Islam. It still pains me that the Charlie Hebdo cartoons aren't freely available, weren't republished the next day in the mainstream media.
Just a quick word before the news, Mark, on this anti-abortion campaigner supported by the Trump administration who's been cleared over her silent prayer protest. This is Rose Doherty, who was arrested after police were called to reports of an anti-abortion protest near the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital in Glasgow in February. She was holding a sign that read, "Coercion is a crime, here to talk only if you want." And that's the point about exclusion zones around abortion clinics, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And the reason this is such a startling case, delighted she's been cleared, is we've gone a bit beyond freedom of speech now. This now seems to be freedom of conscience. OK, she's holding a sign, but she's not berating women who are going into the abortion clinic. It's very clear she's there to speak only if you want to. We're starting to arrest people for what they think in their own head. Silent praying. It's not even freedom of expression now, it's freedom of conscience.
Although if she'd done so a few hundred metres down the road, it wouldn't have been a problem.
Yeah, but I think you should be able to think to yourself in your own head anywhere, whether it's right outside an abortion clinic or not. We shouldn't have exclusion zones where you can't think.
But it wasn't just thought. It wasn't just thought, though, Mark. She was communicating to people, perhaps in a very vulnerable state, going in for an abortion.
What, a very vulnerable state? Come and speak to me only if you want to. We consider that to be a statement worthy of arrest. Extraordinary. Had she been hurling abuse at these people, threatening them with hellfire and damnation, screaming and yelling at them, OK, that might be a breach of the peace. But what this woman was doing was anything but that. Come and speak to me if you wish to, and I'm going to pray in my own head. The idea that the British police force are in any way involved in lifting that woman and arresting her is, to my view, bizarre and chilling. Thankfully, she's now been cleared, but it should never have been anywhere near the criminal authorities in the first place.
Mark, thank you as always. Mark Littlewood there, Director of Popular Conservatism. Thank you to Leslie, who says it's a scare tactic to say Putin could invade other NATO countries. The USA would bomb them off the face of the earth. Well, Leslie, I think it's a scare tactic too, especially as they've only managed to take a fifth of Ukraine in 3.5 years. How on earth are they saying they could attack a NATO country? And that is something that's been used on many, many occasions and has been said. Why was Robert Jenrick not doing this bill when he was in Cabinet? I'm a Tory voter, says this texter. And Gary says, if we ever needed an alien invasion, it's now. Take me to your leader. That's what I would say. Who is the leader, though? Who's the leader you would take them to? Anton Deck? I'm not sure. Lots to discuss in the next hour. We will discuss the migration issue. We'll also talk about Putin and Trump, of course. Let me know your thoughts as well. We'll get you on the air before 7.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good evening, this is Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. It's just gone 5 o'clock. Lots to discuss here on Talk, including the moves to end the war in Ukraine. Will this Alaska summit work between Trump and Putin? Let me know your thoughts about that. We'll talk to a professor of Russian politics in a moment. We'll also talk about this pro-Iranian children's camp axed amid extremism fears. I certainly don't want any British children going there. Also, higher fees for wider burial plots are like a fat tax. This is a third of people in one council area are clinically obese, and now they're going to be charged more for the fact that they need wider graves. We'll get your thoughts on all of that. Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. We'll talk as well before the end of the programme about what's in the sun tomorrow. We'll talk as well about an air traffic controller who's been suspended for broadcasting Free Palestine to Israeli planes. Maybe don't make the political points, maybe guide the planes to safety, which is your job as an air traffic controller. Lots to discuss. 0344 499 1000. You can text me at 72222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at TalkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a voice note like Pete did in the last hour, 0344 499 1000. Use that number as well to give me a ring, or indeed send me a WhatsApp text message as well. Plenty to discuss between now and 7 o'clock. Stay with me here on Talk. Thank you to Sam. He says, how about this? Tell Putin if they let him keep the territory he has invaded, then Ukraine will be allowed to join NATO. If he gives it all back, Ukraine will agree not to apply on the condition that if he invades, it will get supplied with weapons from the West. Plenty of people talking about what Sir Gerald Howarth has said as well. Paul in Belfast says, I served in the army for 33 years. Russia were launching all their air and missile attacks from within Russia. How can you intimate that allowing Ukraine to fire weapons into Russia could have been viewed as an escalation? It's war. Why should only Russia be allowed to fire long-range weapons and Ukraine not allowed to fire weapons back at Russia, says Paul. Paul, I wasn't arguing either way. I was simply saying that if the weapons were given on the condition that they're not fired into Russia, they're for defence rather than for aggression, well, that is the condition that was put on many of the weapons that were given to Ukraine. I was just reflecting that position, Paul, but it's a good point from you, and thank you for it. One more from Heather, who says Donald Trump's peace talks with Putin, inviting Zelensky, it's a start, and you've got to give peace a chance. You've got to give it time and patience to get peace through to the final work together. That's logic and common sense. I prefer peace talk than war, says Heather. I think I'm in the same camp, but at the same time, I certainly don't want capitulation or surrender. We've seen today that following a call with the Coalition of the Willing, other European leaders, the Prime Minister Keir Starmer shared his thoughts on the upcoming meeting between Presidents Trump and Putin.
This meeting on Friday that President Trump is attending is hugely important. And as I've said personally to President Trump, look, for 3 and a bit years this conflict has been going on, and we haven't got anywhere near the prospect of actually a viable solution, a viable way of bringing it to a ceasefire. And now we do have that chance because of the work that the President has put in. And as a result of the announcement that the meeting was going to take place in Alaska, we've had our national security advisors in Chevening in the UK, and I'm really pleased that Vice President Vance is on the call here, because of course he was integral to the discussions that went on quite intensely last weekend in terms of the thinking, the shaping and the trying to make a success of what happens on Friday. So Vice President Vance, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for the work that you put in relation to this alongside our NSAs.
That's the Prime Minister speaking yesterday. He, of course, met Zelensky today at Downing Street, and shortly after that clip, the US President Donald Trump spoke about the likelihood of a meeting between Putin and Zelensky to end the war.
No, it was always going to be, I was going to meet with President Putin, and then after that I'm going to call the leaders and President Zelensky. I'm going to call President Zelensky, and then I'll call, probably in that order, the leaders. There's a very good chance that we're going to have a second meeting, which will be more productive than the first, because the first is I'm going to find out where we are and what we're doing. Again, this is Biden's war. This isn't my war. He got us into this thing. And it should have never happened. This war would have never happened if I were president. But it is what it is, and I'm here to fix it.
This war would never have happened if he'd been president, says Donald Trump. And it's interesting, some of the language, some of the tone of some of the exchanges in the last few hours. The Russian president, Vladimir Putin, he has praised Donald Trump for his efforts to find a resolution to the conflict.
Который, как всем хорошо известно, предпринимает.
And secondly, I will tell you about the stage we are at with the current American administration, which, as everyone knows, is making, in my opinion, quite energetic and sincere efforts to stop the hostilities, stop the crisis and reach agreements that are of interest to all parties involved in this conflict, in order to create long-term conditions for peace, both between our countries and in Europe, and in the world as a whole. If, at the next stage, we reach agreements in the area of control over strategic offensive weapons.
Well, we know at least some of the Russian delegation is on the way to Alaska for those talks that are happening tomorrow. I want to talk to Professor Sam Green. He's a professor in Russian politics at King's College London and author of Putin versus the People. Sam, thank you for joining me today. How likely do you think a positive outcome is after tomorrow's talks?
It's not impossible. That's about as good as I can get on that. I mean, look, there's a number of issues here, right? One of which is that we're dealing with two politicians in Trump and Putin who thrive on being unpredictable, right? These are not people who work through institutions and through the usual protocols of politics and diplomacy. And so we simply have very little idea of what's actually going to be on the agenda, much less whether that agenda has any chance of success. But this is not the first time that the U.S. and Russia have spoken about a possible negotiated end to this war, both under this administration and under the Biden administration. And all of those conversations thus far have not led anywhere. Now, eventually, something will happen. Eventually, one of those negotiations will lead to an outcome that will be positive. This could be that, right? But we haven't yet seen any tangible signs that something is different this time around.
Maybe it'll come on Friday. It's significant, is it not, that they are talking and they're talking at this level, at presidential level. Surely, yes, they're unpredictable, as you correctly say, but surely in regard to what they want some form of tangible outcome where both men can say, I've won.
Well, it's interesting. Usually, right, you would wheel out the heads of state, the presidents, the heads of government, when the top level diplomats have done months and months of work, have worked out the shape of an agreement.
I'm fascinated with that, Sam. Why is that not happening now, do you think?
Well, because every once in a while, right, if the formal diplomacy doesn't work, you would actually want to get the big guns out, figuratively speaking, right, in order to see if you can engineer some kind of a breakthrough, because the diplomats don't have the top cover necessarily politically to go in and do what needs to be done, right? So it's not entirely unreasonable that you would want to do it at this level, right? But again, we've seen Putin be very consistent over the years and over the 7 months since Trump has been trying to do this in the second administration about what it is that he wants to achieve in Ukraine. Right, it's really quite clear. He wants to keep the territory that he holds. He wants sanctions relief. He wants recognition of that territory, and he wants an arrangement that leaves him in control over the prospect of escalation when and if the fighting stops. So he doesn't want there to be deterrence. He doesn't want there to be NATO membership or even NATO support for Ukraine. Doesn't want there to be investment in Ukraine's military industrial capacity. Right, that's really been his line from the day that he started this war back in February 2022. Demilitarization, as well as a change of political leadership in Ukraine.
Do you think Zelensky, of course, has mentioned a couple of times that he would be willing to stand down for peace? What would a new regime or a new government in Ukraine likely look like, do you think?
Well, that's a fascinating question. Look, what happens, Ukraine is a boisterous democracy, right? He will stand for elections after martial law is over, and he will likely lose because that's what Ukrainian presidents tend to do, right? But the candidates right now who look like they're in a position to win, right, are people like the current ambassador to the UK, General Zaluzhny, who's a war hero, General Budanov, who runs the Ukrainian Special Services, right? These are not people who are going to be more friendly towards the Kremlin. The reality is this war has traumatized the entirety of the Ukrainian population. And while lots of people would like to see it end and are tired of fighting, that doesn't mean they would like to see it end in a way that leaves Ukraine vulnerable to further Russian aggression.
So what is I mean, it's really interesting you mentioned that, because we have some polling that says that 88% of people want some sort of deal in Ukraine. Of course, everybody wants the war to end, but what that end of the war actually looks like. In your mind, what would be fair? What would be a fair deal?
Well, look, I can't speak on behalf of the Ukrainian.
No, I'm not asking you to, Sam, but just with your expertise, what do you think a fair deal would look like?
A fair deal would have to look like something that actually provides peace and security, right? So it would have to be a deal, unlike the Minsk agreement after the initial invasion of Ukraine back in 2014, 2015. It would have to be a deal that has an enforcement mechanism. It would have to be a deal that makes Russia face up to the probability that if it starts fighting again, it's not just fighting the Ukrainians, but it finds itself in a much bigger and much more dangerous conflict with, at the very least, with Europe, if not with the West more broadly.
What about the coalition of the willing, those supporting from the sidelines here? Keir Starmer, our Prime Minister, would love to be front and centre here, and he seems to want to support Zelensky. Of course, he's had a meeting with him today. Does the rest of it really matter? We know the Americans asked for those talks at Chevening, for example. They clearly want some form of backup, but NATO is a word you don't often hear in the last few days.
Well, it does matter. NATO, of course, is a complicated place to try to do this. There's lots of members. You need unanimity, and that unanimity can come if the United States wants to lead. But clearly, the U.S. position since the start of this administration has been this will have to be done without formal NATO involvement. It can be a place of coordination, right? Those relationships matter, and they're not going anywhere. But NATO will not play that peacekeeping or that peace enforcement role. Look, the U.S. has stopped spending money on Ukrainian defense. Right? Europe has euro for dollar and pound for dollar picked up the entirety of that gap so far in 2025, and it has the capacity to keep doing that. There are certain things that Europe doesn't make, right? So they'll have to buy those from the Americans. The Americans are perfectly happy to sell them. But the issue really is the political commitment and the political engagement, right? What's happened really since Trump came back into power and started this process is that he's created this table, this negotiating table with him at one end and Trump at the other end, and Zelensky is there every once in a while. And the Europeans have been fighting for a seat at that table, rather than saying, actually, what we need to do is sit down with the Ukrainians and design a solution that works for us. This is a war on the European continent, right? The security risks and implications of this war are felt by the Ukrainians, they're felt by the Europeans. They are marginal to the United States, and they will always be marginal to the United States. You had a pro-European administration under Biden. You don't have that now. Who knows what comes next, right? But it will be a continuing problem and vulnerability for the Europeans if they are chasing Trump and Putin around the room rather than trying to create their own political format to drive this forward.
Sam, thank you. That's Sam Green there, Professor of Russian Politics at King's College London. Appreciate that. He's also the author of Putin versus the People. Thank you to Jane, who says, why would President Trump listen to Keir Starmer? He cannot run the UK. He couldn't even acknowledge he went to Scotland to meet the President. And thank you to Phil, who says, I wonder how many dead Ukrainians would be voting for a deal given the chance. Davy Rees are talking about what our interviewee earlier on, Sir Gerald Harth, said, Sir Peter, Sir Gerald was dead right in what he said. I believe Trump is scared of Putin, but also Trump is a big-mouthed idiot. David in Worcestershire says, quite simply, there was an agreement that guaranteed Ukraine's borders. We in the US were joint signatories. We allowed Putin to invade. Knowing about this agreement, we backed down to a bully. We know what happens when you back down to bullies, says David. Zach in Leeds is on the line. He's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Zach, what do you make of this?
Just an interesting thing that I've noticed, it does seem the Europeans, do they even want peace? Because at every point they're sabotaging any kind of negotiations, and, you know, if human history...
How are they sabotaging the negotiations? How are they doing that?
Well, you can't find... at the same time these negotiations are happening, Vladimir Zelensky is in the UK, and the last time something like that happened, it was Boris Johnson in Istanbul, and, you know, they derailed talks which were going to happen weeks after the
But you don't think Zelensky's going to derail these talks? I mean, he's talked about how it's positive, and so has Starmer. Have they not?
Absolutely, but the conditions Zelensky's put, you know, in the entirety of human history, you know, is someone going to conquer that land and then just give it back with no sort of...
What do you think happens on Friday, Zach?
Well, ideally, I hope some kind of negotiated peace does come. You know, millions of people have died. Anyone that's been to war, you know, I haven't, but if you talk to someone that has been to even, you know, limited wars, they'll tell you it's absolutely ghastly. So, you know, ultimately we do want the war to end.
Yeah, but on what conditions, and are we capitulating to Putin as well? That's a big question. I mean, it's got to be peace with honour, doesn't it?
It does, but you know, over history, borders do change, and what can you do? You know, if you want to push them all the way back to Moscow, then it is going to have to be boots on the ground. Can we afford that? Not just financially, but can we afford to send British soldiers there? It won't be Afghanistan. This will be thousands dying every month. You know, is there any appetite for that in the West?
I certainly don't want British soldiers involved. I mean, it would be great if we could even get to it without any soldiers being involved, that it could sort of police itself. Zach, thanks for your thoughts there. That's Zach in Leeds. And Gary says we have over 5,000 nukes aimed at us, all waiting to kill the world in a few days. No one wins when things get tense, so don't let them get tense and lose the nukes. Spending trillions on high-tech weapons, making sure we don't kill each other while people starve to death, says Gary. Ken in Lancashire says we need to stop blaming France. It's our problem, migration, and we're not dealing with it. Stop giving France money. They're not helping. Spend that money sorting it ourselves, says Ken. Stephen in Belfast says forcing the NHS to buy this weight loss drug, is a disgrace. You need to eat a little less and move a little more. It's not complicated. I want my taxation to pay for proper sick people, says Stephen. And thank you to Nick, who says this will be my last message. I'm off for a new life in Iceland, the country, not the shop. I can't face living here anymore. The government don't care or like us, so nothing will improve. I can't face another 4 years, so turning my back on the country I was born in and now hates us. All the best, says Nick. Well, Nick, the good thing is you still can listen from and watch from Iceland if you are in fact moving there. And I've been to Reykjavik, I've been to the Blue Lagoon and various other parts of Iceland. It's a beautiful country. The people are very, very friendly. It's a bit pricier than here, it must be said, sort of London prices for a lot of things. So I hope you enjoy it if that is where you're off to. I also managed to go there with my mother and had a picture of her on Facebook with the caption underneath, "Mum's gone to Iceland." Right then, we'll be talking to Lord Walney in a second, John Woodcock, about this pro-Iranian children's camp axed amid extremism fears. Thankfully, it's no longer happening. Stay with us here on Talk.
And if you haven't quite got the right grades to get into that university, then maybe it isn't the right one for you. But first of all, we need to congratulate these young people who have worked absolutely solidly. We need to congratulate the teachers, the support staff, but most of all the parents who have had to put up with these young, stressed out people, waiting for these results.
Well done, us.
Absolutely, well done, us. And I don't think it was that long ago, Julia, that we would have been receiving our results. So, we can kind of think back to that kind of moment of joy.
Quite a way back for me.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
I want to talk now about a really concerning thing. This is a children's camp, a summer camp, and it is run by people who are apparently sympathetic to the Iranian regime. Girls who attend are required to wear the hijab, segregated from boys other than for daily prayers, talks and a team photo. It's in Cricklewood in northwest London. It's been accused of backing Iran's theocratic regime. The charity has repeatedly praised Ayatollah Khamenei, the country's supreme leader, and described his books as a great read. Also, children, it indicates kind of activities children at Camp Wilaya were likely to take part in. One video posted on Instagram showed a group of young boys and girls drawing and colouring in Palestinian flags and watermelon symbols. Well, we know what those watermelon symbols are for. They're symbols in support of Hamas. The children, described as Maddie's Little Believers, could also be seen making kites, an apparent reference to the paragliders used by Hamas terrorists on the 7th of October to attack people in southern Israel. And in an interview posted on YouTube a year ago with one of the organisers, a cleric associated with this organisation, he had said that the persecution of Jews by Germany and European countries had been justified at the time. Lord Walney is with us, John Woodcock, the former government advisor on political violence and disruption. Good job this has been nixed now, John, but these things will continue to pop up, won't they?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's absolutely the right decision, probably for the wrong reasons that this isn't going ahead. The organisation itself seems completely undeterred and unrepentant, and they are claiming that they are the victims of a campaign of Islamophobia, when in fact nothing could be further from the truth. I mean, it is those who take this wayward interpretation of Islam and create these kind of institutions that are a clear risk of indoctrinating people who are actually a world away from the majority of moderate British Muslims in this country, and we must not be deterred from the safeguarding which is needed to keep children protected, and also to prevent our communities falling further into the grip of the kind of divisive rhetoric that we know the Iranian regime, the Ayatollah, is dedicated in a whole host of ways to spreading onto these shores.
How widespread are these kind of things, this indoctrination? I'm not just talking about these camps, but people who would support either the Iranian regime or Hamas in the UK, because one thing we have seen, and maybe it's just because people think it's a nice name, but in the last year, for example, the name Yahya, which was of course the name of Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas, who was assassinated quite rightly by Israel, has become hugely more popular. There are signs, aren't there, that, that could just be conflating, but there are signs out there that there are a significant minority of people who are not just believing in the religion of Islam, which they're very, very entitled to do so, and there are loads of people who do that perfectly peacefully and uphold British values at exactly the same time, but people who uphold Islamist values and are apparently trying to indoctrinate children into this.
Yeah, that's right. I'm particularly concerned about a a number of officially registered charities, so organisations that have charitable status with all of the benefits that come from that, who have, again, clear links to the Iranian regime, and for whom there is a significant level of evidence of malign activity. There is the Dar al-Hekma Trust is one example, the Abrah Islamic Foundation. Both of those have got active investigations open with the Charity Commission. Well, I say active, but the problem is that these organisations are being dealt with painfully slowly. Often they are allowed to carry on their activities while it's happening, and the message which is sent out more widely risks being that Britain is a soft touch for this kind of influence that can be deeply maligned. So we've got to be much firmer, I think. Our regulatory organisations have got to be firmer at and faster at shutting down unwanted activity. And as a society, the West has got to stop apologising for who we are and what we stand for. We should be, proud to have the values of liberal democracy that we have in Britain, and we should go no further down this path of cultural relativism, which has, I'm afraid, made too many people scared over the years of calling out what common sense suggests is clear wrongdoing and at odds with the kind of values that we should be promoting in this country.
Just finally, John, because I know you've got to go, but do you think bringing in a definition of what has been called Islamophobia would actually help people like this who want to set up these kind of indoctrination camps?
Yeah, the real danger is that the government, with the best of intentions to protect Muslims from anti-Muslim hatred, which has clearly been on the rise, and there are some, awful examples in our communities for which people just going about their daily lives are subjected to, but that they bring in a definition, they call it Islamophobia, and they give unwittingly a shield for people with malign intent to hide behind. And you can see from the protestations, the victim narrative, that the Al-Bayt Islamic mission, the people behind this Camp Wilayah have been propagating. They are trying to claim that this is all Islamophobia, it's just an attack on everyday Muslims, and we must not bring in, as a country, as this government is at risk of doing, a code of conduct which has a further chilling effect against people being able to speak out against this kind of activity.
John, thank you. That is John Woodcock there, Lord Walney, the former government advisor on political violence and disruption, joining us there. Lots of people getting in touch, including Mick, who says the Tory party were up to their noses in migration and curbs on freedom. It was actually Mel Stride who forced through legislation giving government departments access to our bank accounts. Only one party will preserve freedom, and that is Reform UK, says Mick. Michael says aliens would take one look at us and slam their spaceship into reverse on full warp speed. Stuart says, why is Starmer getting involved in the Alaska talks? Great Britain is no longer great. We're a total irrelevance in this, and Starmer should be concentrating on sorting out the problems we have in the UK. Thank you to another Peter, who I promise you is not me, who has sent a lovely message saying that I'm sensible and impartial because I have the intelligence to know what is propaganda and what is fact. Thank you, Peter, and I can honestly say that the vast majority of our viewers and listeners know that too. They get the difference, they understand it, and actually that's part of the reason they come to this great station, because they know a lot of what they're told has an agenda. Everybody has an agenda, certainly in Westminster, and we need to cut through that. We need to be the home of common sense, the home of free speech, and say things that are absolutely true. So, Peter, I really appreciate that. And Alison Billericay says, I did chuckle at your Iceland pun in spite of myself, says Alison. Yeah, I enjoyed it too at the time when I went to Reykjavik with my mother and then put on Facebook, Mum's gone to Iceland. Lots more to discuss, including higher fees for wider burial plots. It is apparently like a fat tax. It's happening in Wolverhampton. What do you think of it? 03444991000. We'll discuss it in a minute.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, plenty of people getting in touch about the Ukraine war. I promise you I'll come to that. Many people reacting to a clip we've put out of Sir Gerald Howarth on Twitter. I'll come back to that in a minute. But Martin in Whitley Bay has been in touch about the Islamic summer camp. Where's the inclusivity so coveted these days? To be fair, there's similar Christian, etc. events for kids, but I don't see them aligning themselves to brutal regimes like Iran. Well done those who got this cancelled. At least some of us are awake. Martin and I went to many Christian summer camps as a kid, and there was no restriction on anybody going there. They could have gone, but certainly we read our Bibles and were told what the way of the cross on those. Certainly when I was younger, as I spent many a summer at the seaside on those. Right then, let's talk about this story. It's a fascinating one, actually. It's from Wolverhampton, and it is a council accused of levelling a fat tax after it had introduced higher charges for wider burial plots at one of its cemeteries. Grieving families burying their loved ones at Danescourt Cemetery in Tettenhall in Wolverhampton will have to pay £2,700 if they need to buy a 6-foot wide plot. That is a 20% increase on the cost of a standard 5-foot grave. I mean, in fairness, it is 20% larger. The decision was made by councillors in May to dedicate a new section of the cemetery for larger coffins. The city has an obesity rate of 33.3%. The latest data available is in 2021. I want to talk to Ross Hickton first, who is the president of the National Society of Allied and Independent Funeral Directors. Ross, thanks for joining me today. Is this fair?
Hi, Peter. Thanks for having me on. No, I don't think it's fair at all, to be perfectly honest with you. The way I see it is families, people have paid tax, VAT, council tax their entire lives, and to be hit potentially with another tax just due to the size of their...
Do you know what, Ross? Sorry to interrupt you. We've literally just heard that Wolverhampton City Council has said it's decided not to proceed with the plans. The council's backed down over these plans to introduce higher charges for wider burial plots at one of its cemeteries after it was accused of levelling a fat tax. Is that a victory, do you think?
Oh, it is. It's a complete victory for the people of Wolverhampton, and also a victory for us funeral directors not having to have that difficult conversation with a family when they're already grieving it as it is.
Do you charge people more for a larger coffin?
No, we don't. And most funeral directors in our membership don't charge any extra fees to care for or look after a larger deceased.
But presumably, in the horrible situation that there is a child that has died, do you charge less for a child's coffin than an adult's coffin?
So, due to the Child Funeral Fund, coffins for children and babies are generally covered by the government's fund.
But do they cost less or more than an adult's coffin?
Oh, they cost less, yes.
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, you could make an argument by saying a larger coffin would cost more, and if people are substantially larger, if you need a lot more room to put their corpse in a coffin, well, you could argue that actually that costs you more. That is more wood, that is more craftsmanship in order to get that happen, and there is a larger plot on the ground that is needed.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, we do absorb those costs. We don't pass that cost on to the family. We don't think it's fair or right to. It'd be a very difficult conversation to have to a family because their deceased is larger or wider, that they need to pay X amount per inch to cover those costs. We as funeral directors just don't feel that's fair.
What is the additional cost if you are? Is a 5-foot wide coffin? A 6-foot wide coffin versus a 5-foot wide coffin, is it 20% more expensive? Is that just the materials, the craftsmanship? Is that just what it's going to cost you as a base price?
No, I wouldn't say it's 20%. Most coffin manufacturers charge per extra inch, probably around £10 per inch.
Okay, so it's actually not a huge amount extra if you need a much bigger coffin. So if you're absorbing those costs, you're absorbing a smallish cost anyway.
Correct.
Okay. Are you surprised that Wolverhampton City Council sort of thought about this, given that there are extra prices and extra charges in regard to larger people? We are getting fatter as a nation.
Well, we are, and the issue and concern we had with Wolverhampton Council is they didn't put this to a public consultation. They put a survey out to, I believe, 25 funeral directors in the city, which not many replied to. But the problem we have there is it's not our decision. They need to speaking to the families. We speak to families on a daily basis regarding their loved ones' funerals. So why they'd consult with funeral directors, considering we're the middle person here, families come to us to arrange the funeral, it should be the public they were speaking to.
Has this been something that families have brought up with you and with your members, Ross?
Some families do bring it up as a concern, but they understand that there is potentially an extra cost. But where authorities don't already charge extra, I don't see that authorities should be charging extra now, particularly after today's decision by Wolverhampton to U-turn at such a short amount of time.
Are there coffins your pallbearers can't carry because they're too heavy?
So that is a good question. So these days we do have equipment, electric trolleys, which are able to take that weight to reduce the health and safety load.
How often are they used?
Not very often. I would say only when you're dealing with a deceased who's probably over 25, 30 stone.
Right, so you do have provision. And do you charge more for that?
No, we don't, no.
So if that has to be used, there's no extra charge for that?
No, not at all.
And have you seen this change, larger people and dealing with larger deceased, as you put them, throughout your career? Is this a problem that's increasing as time goes on?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I've been in the family business 18 years now, so I've been a funeral director for that amount of time. And, you know, you could say 18 years ago, if we ordered a coffin that was 6'3" by 23 inches wide, that was an oversized coffin. Whereas these days, that's one of our normal stock coffins. So we do see the population growing and the demand on services for people who are larger. Yes, we do.
Okay, fascinating talking to you, Ross. Thank you. That's Ross Hickton there, who's president of the National Society of Allied and Independent Funeral Directors. Let's speak to Jane DeVille-Hammond, who is chairwoman of the British Obesity Society. Jane, good to talk to you. We know in the last little while that Wolverhampton City Council has decided not to proceed with the plans for Danescourt Cemetery and Tetton Hall after the condemnation of people like yourself and funeral directors. Presumably you'll be happy with that?
Yes, great victory. Well done. Yeah, I'm glad Wolverhampton's seen sense. I mean, it's really tough because Wolverhampton has one of the highest deprivation areas in the country. We know that deprivation and poverty go hand in hand with obesity. We already know that people are kind of, you know, struggling in Wolverhampton, and the idea that, you know, even in death, they're going to be penalised, you know, for their life seems
but
terrible.
If it is a larger plot and it is a larger coffin, and people have presumably been spending more money for larger clothes, for example, well, is that not fair to say, well, if you require a smaller grave or if you require a smaller coffin, that you should pay less because it is by definition smaller, there's less of it?
Listen, I understand, and I understand the kind of financial costs of it. And in lots of other areas, I would definitely not be on the side of an obese person, because there are instances where, you know, they will have to pay more. But I think when we come to funerals, you know, we need to be compassionate. I mean, someone's died. They're already, you know, they've probably been stigmatized the whole of their life, and then even in death, you know, the worry knowing that their relatives...
you're not stigmatized if you're dead.
No, but their relatives, they know that the fact that they were obese is going to impact on their relatives having to pay like more for a funeral plot.
Although funerals are really expensive anyway, any funeral that people pay for is going to be thousands of pounds. I'm not saying, you know, I'm not saying that the funeral should be more expensive or that that's fair that they do cost thousands of pounds, but I'm sure there are funeral directors listening who say, like, that's just what it costs. I mean, is it fair to, the prices are, everybody's going to pay more overall because those prices are going to be absorbed, as we've just heard there from Ross. So is it fair to penalise people who are thinner and families of people who are thinner for people who are larger because the costs need to be absorbed?
Well, maybe the council ought to absorb some of the costs. They waste enough money in other areas. You know, maybe.
Why is it up to the council? Why should this be up to the council?
Well, I think we should have a generic price that everyone pays for a plot. I mean, let's face it, not that many people get buried these days, do they? I mean, we're not talking about vast amounts of people, I don't think. You know, a lot more people probably get cremated than buried. I mean, I don't know the stats. I'm pretty sure Ross knew the stats, but I think
certainly in England anyway, where I come from in Northern Ireland, the statistics are many more people being buried than cremated. But you're absolutely right. But even the cremation costs are presumably more for a person who's physically larger.
I don't know whether they are. I think in the future we need to maybe think about different ways of burying people, maybe more conservative ways of conserving land. But I think for the moment, and I think, you know, Ross is absolutely right, we should have asked and consulted with the people of Wolverhampton, and it seems to me that there's been so much outcry over it that they've actually retracted what they were going to do.
No, they have in the last time.
Clearly, when they, you know, I mean, I'm not, you know, overweight particularly. I'm just an ordinary average weight. But I think that, you know, it's absolutely totally unfair at the point of death to charge someone for an extra space in a grave. You know, that's me, and I'm sure that lots of people in Wolverhampton feel the same, which is why there's been such an outcry. As I say, I totally understand the finances of it, you know, and most people do. But I think there are some things, it's a bit like the NHS and healthcare, there are some things that need to be sacred. And I think, you know, in death, I think this is kind of one of those things that we need to consider the impact this will have on families. And I think, you know, in particular, as I say, Wolverhampton, we have a high incidence of obesity, we have a lot of poverty, and the extra cost, you know, the extra £500 for a plot for someone to be buried, I just think it's unfair.
Okay, thank you, Jane. That's Jane DeVille-Ammond, who is chairwoman of the British Obesity Society. The Wolverhampton City Council says it's decided not to proceed with the plans. Recently, this afternoon, they've capitulated. And Mark is in Norfolk and says, I work in the funeral business. Trust me, bigger people cost more to handle, cremate and bury. It's the difference between a 4-man carry and a 6-man carry, for example. Certainly you need to employ more people to lift them. We did hear about people who are 30 stone, for example, having electric trolleys to bring them down in the funeral home or the church. Stephen Millings in Belfast says, so should an extra large t-shirt cost more than a small? That's what he is asking. Alison says the larger coffins will definitely be more expensive. I can't see a problem at all. And Lorraine says, if you go down the route of charging for an obese corpse, then how about charging for height? It's ridiculous. For goodness sake, even the sanctity of dignity and death is now being taken away. It's a fair point, but you're talking about materials. You're talking about a commercial service that people are having, and whether you're cremated or buried or whatever. Personally, I quite like to be stuffed. Stay with us here on Talk.
The people you meet when you go into the camps in France, these people smugglers, these are just jumped up gangsters. Yeah. They're not like criminal masterminds. No. Like, you can find these people within minutes when you walk into the camps. Right. These people just need to be arrested. and you've got to deport all of the migrants when they come into our country. It's really as simple as that. You don't need to spend billions and billions. You don't need to change the law so you can use counter-terrorism powers to go after these people. It's actually relatively simple.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Donald Trump is going to make some remarks from the White House in about 10 minutes' time. We'll bring them to you here live on Talk, so stay tuned for that. In the meantime, we're going to take some of your calls. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. James in Watford has done that. James, I think it's migration you want to talk about. You're very welcome to the programme.
Thank you very much, Peter. Yeah, I think it's a deterrent that we need, which is been tried quite a few times. But I think if we introduced, say, 2 years automatic national service on arrival, I think that would be a deterrent in its own right.
I know there are some people who are immediately going to say, James, do you want to give these people weapons? Or could the National Service take another type? Could it be helping people in care homes, for example? Could it be earning your citizenship by doing jobs that people don't want?
Yeah, you could take another avenue, but yeah, you've got a point with the weapons. But I think as a deterrent that would work.
Certainly if they've got to give something back, or even just pay back the money they've received in hotel costs, in fees, for example, the kind of benefits that are there as well. I mean, that I do think, I think it's the principle that annoys me most, James, is people who've contributed absolutely nothing to our economy getting, you know, a huge number of benefits and a lifestyle that many people in this country can't afford and will never be able to afford.
No, that's right. Totally agree with you there. It's so unfair. It's not what this country was built on.
Yeah,
you know.
It's a very good point, James, and thank you for it. That was James in Watford there. Angela's been in touch on Twitter and says, good afternoon, Peter. What happened to the over 80 migrants in a boat being illegal? Never did understand that or anything else. Our hapless Home Secretary says, or doesn't say in her regular updates. Tad in Cambridge says, oh no, actually I've read that one out. Tad says, I'm an advocate of free speech, and for someone to be arrested for praying silently in their head is a quantum leap towards a dangerous form of totalitarianism. Worse still when such legislation favours just one section of the community. It lays the ground for civil insurrection. I'm glad the Americans are bringing the UK's government's feelings to the fore, because therein lies the way to social disintegration, says Tad. Edo says, Ukraine have lost the war. The West does not have the resources to change the situation. Time Western leaders sucked it up and concede. Wake up. Also, Bob says, regarding the proposal for legislation to define Islamophobia, it would hold no authority over me. Whatever they came up with, I simply ignore it. Great show, as per usual. The problem is, Bob, when the law catches up with you, if you say or tweet something, that it would be illegal in that case if there is a definition of Islamophobia. But yes, I totally get your point. Adam says, Trump has stopped more wars than any other president in history. James says the NATO proxy war has already been lost. The Yanks are just looking for a way out without losing face in the eyes of the world. Adrian on Twitter says, sorry, I was dipping in and out. Did your guest supporting weight loss drugs just say, we'll have to wait and see what the long-term side effects are? Yes, he did, and I challenged him on that and said, I'm probably not going to put something in my body that I don't know the long-term side effects for, but lots of people are. And on Monjaro, Dallas says, evening, Peter, I have a great way to lose lots of pounds on Monjaro. Leave it in the shop, exercise more and eat less, save money on food and even more on a few bus fares or petrol fill-ups. quids in. And on Monjaro, someone calling herself Mad Cat Woman. We love Mad Cat people here. I'm a Mad Cat man. This is heartbreaking for a lot of people who have tried everything and this is their last resort. I'm disabled. It has changed my life. I eat healthily and the Monjaro drug stops me feeling hungry. Result has been 2 stone off. I can't afford it now though. Also, another person says, Peter, are you so naive as to say that the funeral director, he does not absorb the cost of a larger coffin for fatties, the rest of funeral purchasers subsidise it? Well, I did make that point, I'm afraid. You know, I did say that money will come from somewhere. That's not a funeral director doing it out of the goodness of their heart. On immigration, Debbie in Essex has been in touch and has some thoughts on this. Debbie, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi Peter, how are you?
I'm very well, thanks. How are you, Debbie?
I'm good, thank you. I was just getting up to you, well, maybe an hour and so ago, talking about the boats and the immigration.
Yeah.
And I just wondered, once they've reached our waters and they, you know, get off the boats and go off to where they're these, you know, amazing hotels and everything else, what happens to the boats? Do they go back to France?
That seems to be what happens. It shouldn't happen, but it does, Debbie.
It does happen.
Mm-hmm.
Should we not be within our rights to be able to confiscate those boats and destroy them immediately?
Yes, I totally agree with that, and I do think. I mean, we saw some of the French police at least once anyway, using Stanley knives to puncture them. I mean, that's exactly what we should do. We should render them unusable.
That was on one boat.
Yeah, well, exactly. You're absolutely right. It's only on one occasion. Yeah.
So, yeah, again, I just think, why are we not able to seize these boats like you would have old cars and you take them to the yard and have them crushed immediately? All along the waterfront somewhere, there is going to be somewhere that you can destroy these vessels. And, you know, it's not going to stop it, but it's just going to make it that much harder.
Just a little bit harder. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Because they've then got to, you know, they've got to renew their boats and their vessels, and they're getting that, you know, 107 people on one small boat coming in. It's beyond ridiculous. So, yeah, there should be all sorts of laws going on in this country.
That aren't there already. Debbie, you make a perfect sense there, and thank you so much for your call. I really appreciate it. Lots of people getting in touch about the weighty issues we're talking about today. Matthew in Sunderland regarding the fat tax, he says, I see absolutely no problem with this, Peter. If someone's super thin and super fat purchase a grave or airline ticket or clothing, why shouldn't the fat pay more? They take up, use more space and materials. In my opinion, this should expand the fat tax to airline seats and clothing, says Matthew in Sunderland. What if you're a Fijian rugby player and you're just a large person? That is something that I think, and also with an airline flight, I mean, if you're a short person, should you pay less even though you're taking up roughly the same space? I mean, the height doesn't matter so much as the sort of as the width really. Someone has texted in saying Wolverhampton avoids making a grave mistake. See what you did there. Max in Minchinhampton, never heard of Minchinhampton. Ryan, producer, could you look up where Minchinhampton is, please? I don't know where that is. Evening, Peter. I weigh 13 stone. Why should I pay extra on check-in baggage allowance if I breach 23 kilograms if the bloke next to me weighs 17 stone? Minchinhampton is in Gloucestershire. Max, thank you for that, and Ryan, thank you for that as well. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair point. I mean, I weigh about 17 stone, and maybe I should pay more for my, I mean, the luggage thing as well. Also, if you're bigger and you're wearing more clothes, or if you wear a jacket, presumably you're taking weight off. I mean, it's all something you need to think about quite carefully, I think. Jill's in Cornwall and has some thoughts on the weight loss jab. Jill, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Oh, gosh, well, here goes. I just think that people now I've seen lots of very large people walking around, and they just don't seem to bother about what they eat or the fact that they don't exercise. It just seems such a cop-out to sort of have a situation where you can have an injection to lose weight. I mean, what does that sort of say to the coming generation.
Well,
you know?
I think it says a lot of things, Jill. I think it says that if you can just inject yourself or take a pill, and then these things all go away, and you can do without taking any personal responsibility for what you've done. Also, I think with this grave aspect, which I'm basically against, actually, I do think if you're a larger person or if you're a fat person, let's call them what they are, fat people. I'm a fat person. I'm talking about fat people. Should you have to pay a bit more for a grave? Yes. Frankly, because you're categorically taking up more space, aren't you?
So is your answer to being fat not to bother about exercise and eating healthily and things like that? Just do what you want, have a jab, and that's it.
No, absolutely not. I don't, and I worry like you, Jill, about the long-term effects. I'd be lying if I hadn't thought about taking Mounjaro or Ozempic. I know people who've taken it. I know people who have had side effects, but we don't know what the long-term effects are. You also lose muscle mass as well as fat, and getting that back is very, very difficult. And I'm not going to put that stuff into my body.
You don't look. I'm sorry. You don't look fat though. You look healthy and good. I wouldn't have said. I'm talking about really large people that don't care what they eat, how they live, what they do.
Well, I'll be honest with you, Jill. I wish I was a bit lighter. I wish I had maybe a couple of stone off. But the only person who's responsible for that is me. I'm not blaming anybody else. I'm not blaming advertising. I'm not blaming society. I'm not blaming portions. I'm not blaming processed food. I'm not blaming anything. I'm blaming myself. I'm the person, it's your own willpower. And I do think that people do need to take a lot more personal responsibility.
Yeah, I do too. And it also bothers me that children are coming into this world and living and growing and seeing that do what you want, think what you want, eat what you want, and if you get too large to walk, then have a jab. I mean, that's no way to sort of create a healthy society, is it?
Well, I totally agree with you, Jill, especially if the jab in itself is not something that we can guarantee is going to be good in the longer term. And yes, I mean, that person who tweeted in and said, hold on a second, did that person say we don't know the longer term effects and we'll find out when we do? Well, we will find out when we do, but why prescribe something if you know that it is potentially not safe anyway? Lots more to discuss in this. We'll also take Trump's words from the White House as well, so stay with us here on Talk. It's a big day.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. It's just gone 6 o'clock or 1 o'clock in Washington, D.C. in the afternoon, where President Trump is going to address us in the next few minutes. We'll bring that to you live here on Talk. We'll get your reaction as well to all of it. 0344 499 1000. This is just 24 hours before he meets President Putin in Alaska. We know that some Russian diplomats have already arrived in Anchorage there, where that big summit is going to be taking place on the future of Ukraine. We have two experts standing by to give analysis on what the president says, Dr. Bob Seeley and Jim Jatras. Bob is a former Conservative MP, military expert, and Jim is a former US diplomat and foreign policy advisor for the Republican leadership in the Senate. We want your thoughts, of course, as well. We'll talk this hour about an air traffic controller who broadcast Free Palestine to Israeli planes. We'll find out what's in the Sun tomorrow, and we'll get all of your thoughts on all the issues of the day, including the one that lots of people have got in touch about, which is, of course, the price of a grave, and whether, if you're a large person, if you need more space in the grave, you should be charged 20% extra. Lots of people getting their thoughts in on that. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at TalkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a voice message. You can send me a WhatsApp text message or give me a ring, all on the main number 0344 499 1000. Stay with us here on Talk. Well, as I say, President Trump is about to speak from the White House. We'll bring that to you live. I'm just keeping an eye on the monitor here, and as soon as he starts talking, I will preemptively apologise to Bob Seeley and Jim Jatras at having to interrupt them when the President starts talking. Bob is, of course, the former Conservative MP and military expert. He's author of Total War, about new forms of warfare in the 21st century. And Jim Jatras is a former US diplomat, foreign policy advisor for the Republican leadership in the US Senate. Both of you are very welcome to the programme this evening, and I just have that caveat that I may need to cut you off very, very quickly and apologise for that. Jim, maybe I could start with you. There's so much that is at stake here in terms of what this summit is about. I just wonder what your thoughts are on what is potentially achievable in the next 24, 48 hours.
I think the short answer, Peter, is not much, at least not on Ukraine. I think they could maybe make some progress on arms control agreements, or maybe direct contacts between the United States and Russia, direct flights, maybe some economic issues around the Arctic or the Bering Strait. But on Ukraine itself, Trump is going to go there, and at least what he said lately, we'll see what he says in his next press conference, but he says he wants to demand a ceasefire, and almost certainly Putin will not agree to that. And if that is the case, that puts the ball back in Trump's court. Does he go down the road of more sanctions, which are unlikely to achieve any effect, or does he try to walk away from the whole thing and dump the whole steaming pile on the lap of the Europeans and pretend it's not our problem anymore?
Speaking of the Europeans, Bob Seeley, there have been, of course, many efforts. We saw Zelensky in Downing Street today, this coalition of the willing, the call that took place yesterday with Starmer as well. What role do you think they play in this, or is it simply down to two men, Bob?
Well, I think it's very secondary. I mean, I think what Jim says is depressing, but actually pretty on the money, I'm afraid to say. It's always nice to hope and to say, let's hope we can, because hundreds of thousands of Russians and Ukrainians have died. This war is going to continue to kill lots of people if it continues. The problem is with this that there is a fundamental issue here, which is Putin doesn't want an independent Ukraine to exist. And he's pretty much dedicated the last few years, arguably the war started back in 2005, or the conflict started back in 2005, and he's dedicating pretty much his remaining years to destroy Ukraine, to recreate Russia as a virulently anti-Western nation and society, and indeed he will get the chance to break NATO. So there is an argument to suggest that he will try to string Trump along, that he will offer some kind of negotiating pathway in order to find ways of manipulating and dividing the United States and the European Union, as he does indeed with some European leaders. Do I think he's going to turn up and say, this has been a dreadful mistake, I'm really sorry and I want to stop the war? No, I don't think so.
I wonder, Bob, what you think in terms of, well, I suppose what Trump might say now to pave the way. We know he's going to speak to us in the next few minutes. What is the challenge ahead for him?
Look, the challenge ahead for him is not to look like he's being played by Putin.
Yeah.
And I think he has reacted against some of that so far this year, because I think Putin has strung him along in a way which is sort of borderline arrogant and disrespectful, and I do think that Trump has personally offended him, and I think if I was Putin, I would probably try to reel Trump in and play him a little bit more intelligently. I mean, there's an argument to say that Putin won't do that, and he will just sort of effectively say the West is our enemy. It'll play well in Russia in the short term. It gives him less to manipulate and to try to find divisions between the Westerners. And Putin is a man who will try to use non-military tactics to deliver the victories that his soldiers can't deliver in the field. So he will try to play Trump, and the issue is for Trump: is he going to take what's Trump's idea of success? And I'm not quite sure. Is it the start of negotiations, however empty they may be? Is he about to walk away? He could say, look, I've tried, and hand it back to the Europeans, or just basically say, well, he keep on supporting Ukraine, and let's see if Russia in the next year or so runs out of men and machinery. 2 years ago, all the experts said Russia couldn't run on the amount of casualties it has and the amount of equipment losses. It's managed to do both. How much longer? Could it last another year or two? Potentially.
Jim, I wonder whether you think Trump can be an honest broker here, especially given how previously, certainly the Biden administration was incredibly pro-Ukraine. Trump has had arguments, including in the Oval Office, with Zelensky. They seem to be on a more even keel now. Certainly there are worries that Putin is manipulating him. There are historical allegations in regard to the New York property market, for example. That's been in various books and things. I just wonder what you think Trump can realistically achieve here.
Yeah, I think that's a fundamental flaw in the way Trump has approached this. He cannot be an honest broker. He wants to pretend this is a fight between Ukraine and Russia, which, as even Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, has admitted, this is a proxy war between the United States and NATO and Russia, and Ukraine is the venue. Ukraine is a tool in that proxy war. It is the proxy. So no, he can't go in there and knock Zelensky's and Putin's head together and say, you boys play nice. That's not going to happen. I think Bob's right, though. I think Putin is trying to jerk him around. I mean, let's face it. He's not the only one doing that. I mean, look at Mark Rutte calling him daddy. And I mean, everybody wants to flatter him, knowing that he's got a big ego. He wants to be a winner. He wants to have a Nobel Prize. You tell him what he wants to hear and try to string him along. Putin's not the only one doing that. In fact, I think that's the reason Putin agreed to this summit in the first place. I do disagree with Bob about what's happening militarily. We've seen a very dramatic crash in the Ukrainian lines near Pokrovsk. I think the Ukrainian army is in trouble. Trump knows that. Putin knows that. The Ukrainians know that, and the Europeans know that. And I think time is not on the West side in this.
So if there is a pressure from the time in terms of timing here, will that put will that put Trump and potentially Zelensky into a tight spot, Bob, do you think?
I'm not so sure. And with regards to what Jim says, yeah, there has been some moderately bad news from some positions around Pokrovsk, but the Russians are still taking vast casualties, and we're talking about over 1,000 a day and thousands a month. So even at this rate, it would take years for them to conquer a sizable chunk of Ukraine. The idea that the Ukrainian front lines are suddenly going to collapse, I don't buy. simply because of the amount of drones that they've now got coming online, but also because the Ukrainians are beginning to use land drones and modestly at the moment, but it'll be more next year, replace human beings with land drones. They can't do that entirely, but they can do that somewhat. So the idea that we're going to have a military collapse and a military victory for Russia, at the very best, from the Russian perspective, they might have taken most of Donbass by the end of next year. That is a very, very long time, and there will be another 300,000 casualties before that happens. So I'm dubious about how bad things are for the Ukrainians, although there's a permanent struggle in electronic warfare, in the sort of missile defense over Ukrainian cities, in the daily drone battle on the front line. So there's lots of fluidity in the war, but the Russians are still moving very slowly, although they are moving forward in places.
Just finally, Jim, when we look at Trump's language around this, when he talked specifically in regard to exchanges of land and so on, do you think that was just him talking off the top of his head, or do you think that's a realistic prospect, Jim, in terms of what will be discussed?
I'm sure the topic will come up. I'm not sure how realistic it is. The Russians have been very clear in their demands since June of last year that the Ukrainians must pull back from the constitutional limits of the 4 oblasts. The 2, Lugansk and Donetsk, are largely under the control. Kherson and Zaporozhye are not. I don't see the Ukrainians agreeing to that. I suppose in exchange, the Russians could pull back from the areas they hold in other oblasts. But again, I think the bigger problem is this. If there is a ceasefire based on any kind of agreement on territory, which of course the Ukrainians will not agree to, that means that so-called coalition of willing forces, British, French, Germans, will go into Ukraine. And the Russians, again, would have to be insane to agree to a ceasefire that would allow that to happen, because then they will find themselves fighting all of NATO, not just the Ukrainians. And I don't think they want that. Frankly, I don't think anybody should want that.
Gentlemen, thank you both very much. That's Dr. Bob Seely, former Conservative MP, military expert, author of Total War About New Forms of Warfare in the 21st Century. And we also heard from Jim Jatras, who is a former US diplomat and foreign policy advisor for the Republican leadership in the US Senate. Thanks to John, who sent me a WhatsApp to say Trump is in a no-lose game. Secure peace and he gets a Nobel Prize, plus some transactional upsides. Fail and he can sanction Russia and blame Ukraine when he stops funding the war. Chris in Epsom has some thoughts on this too. He's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Chris, I'll say what I said to the two gents previously. I may have to cut you off very quickly in order to get Trump on the air, because he is talking from the White House very, very soon. But in the meantime, let's have a chat. What would you like to say?
Well, two things, immigration and Putin. First of all, we need to stop the boats. And there's something that's happened recently in France that I'm not sure you're aware of. But the French judiciary have reversed an earlier decision banning Palestinians from applying for refugee status in France.
Yeah, I'm aware of that, yeah.
Yeah, well, that now means that any number up to 2 million can apply for refugee status in France. And however many do you think they're going to stay in France in tents or jump on boats?
Very good point, well made, yeah.
It's been a national security issue for months, if not years. But this now, we are really heading for the abyss.
Okay, and the point you wanted to make on Ukraine as well, Chris?
On Ukraine, it's so difficult. I mean, those people have been fighting for 3.5 years.
And longer, yeah.
Yeah, and the thing is that I don't think anybody's got a complete answer, because as one part of it is right, then you'll have to change and move. It's a kinetic thing. The one thing that worries me is that I would like to see an end to it, but I don't want to see a transactional deal that gives Putin any gain, because he will just spend the next few years rearming. He's already got, the same as he did in Donbass, he's already got irregular troops in Moldova who are demanding a separate nation status, and that's in amongst the Balkans, because that's not a NATO. It's not a NATO country, so he's not risking Section 5.
Yeah, the Article 5. Yeah, attack on one is an attack on all. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know, Peter? I mean, I'm 64. I finished my bit with the army in 1985, almost another lifetime ago. During my 6 years, all of my training was against the Russians, and was specifically against their special forces troops that would come here. Russia and other countries and leaders that don't like us, they push people over here that they know that they could turn at a moment's notice. I think we are now really heartbreakingly closer to World War III than we ever were when I trained between 79 and 85. It's not going to take much for it to go wrong. We are heading in that direction.
And I think a lot of people agree with you, Chris. I just hear that. I hear that so often, and I hope it's not the case. But listen, you've been there, done that, bought the T-shirt and served our country, and thank you for it. That was Chris in Epsom there. Thank you to Gary as well on the weight loss aspect that we've been talking about this afternoon. He says, I think people forget that weight gain is linked to your state of mind. Over 2 years, I've gone from a very fit person to having 4 operations. This is affected by mental health, and food is a feel-good drug. Much like other addictions, there's also not enough education around cooking, says Gary. Gary, I'm sorry to hear about those operations. I hope you are feeling okay. Some breaking news here on Talk, and that is that the King will address the nation tomorrow on the 80th anniversary of Victory in Japan Day. That's going to happen tomorrow, no doubt. We will bring that to you here on Talk. As it happens, that is the breaking news that the King is to address the nation tomorrow on the 80th anniversary of Victory in Japan Day. Of course, we had the 80th anniversary of Victory in Europe Day on the 8th of May from memory. Yes, it was the 8th of May. So we will, of course, bring you what the King has to say tomorrow. We're going to talk in a second to Jake Wallace-Simons about an air traffic controller broadcasting Free Palestine to Israeli planes. He's thankfully been suspended from that. We'll also bring you what Donald Trump says. He's now 19 minutes late from the 6 o'clock address, but as soon as he starts speaking, we will bring it to you live here on Talk. Stay with us.
People you meet when you go into the camps in France, these people smugglers, these are just jumped up gangsters. Yeah. They're not like criminal masterminds. No. Like, you can find these people within minutes when you walk into the camps. Right. These people just need to be arrested. And you've got to deport all of the migrants when they come into our country. It's really as simple as that. You don't need to spend billions and billions. You don't need to change the law so you can use counter-terrorism powers to go after these people. It's actually relatively simple.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
I want to talk now about an absolutely horrendous story. This is an air traffic controller who went out of his way to broadcast Free Palestine to Israeli planes. Now, if you're an air traffic controller, it's an incredibly responsible job. You want people who are of sound mind and who will do the job to keep literally hundreds of people safe. You cannot have a bad day if you're an air traffic controller. It all has to be right all the time. So why did one of them think that it was an okay thing to do to talk about a Free Palestine to Israeli planes, when actually what they should have been doing was keeping those Israeli lives and other people who aren't Israeli, who happen to be travelling on the plane, safe? That should be the one and only priority of any air traffic controller dealing with a plane. I speak to Jake Wallace-Simons, who's an author and columnist. Jake, just tell us what happened here.
Well, simply that Israel's flagship carrier, El Al, reported that its pilots had received shouts of Free Palestine from the air traffic controller at Paris Charles de Gaulle airport. And obviously, as you've said, this is more serious than it sounds. I mean, it could just be from one point of view, some guy mouthing off. From another point of view, these pilots and their passengers, their lives were in this chap's hands as the air traffic controller. So it could have been construed. I mean, if I was in their shoes trying to fly a plane, the person responsible for keeping me safe was shouting Free Palestine at me in support of my enemies, I would be really worried that this was a prelude to something rather more serious.
Yes, indeed. And of course, air traffic controllers and pilots need to be hyper-focused, incredibly focused. Pilots can't have a bad day at work either. They need to make sure that they keep people safe at all times. And certainly if you hear that in your ear, especially when it's got absolutely nothing to do with the airspace you're occupying or the airport that you are landing at, well, that would have been very worrying and distressing for people who should not be distressed, should have to be as calm as possible, because they have hundreds of people's lives in their hands.
That's right. I mean, when I heard this story, my immediate reaction was, how dare he? I mean, how dare he do that? You know, it's nothing to do, whatever his views on the Israel-Palestine conflict or what is going on in Gaza, that had nothing to do with those pilots and with those passengers on that regular commercial flight coming in and going out from Paris. And this is only the latest example of anti-Semitism on airlines. Last week it emerged that Jewish passengers had been given kosher meals with Free Palestine scrawled on it on the Spanish airline, Iberia. Last month, of course, those Jewish children returning from France on a summer camp were frog-marched off the Vueling flight to Paris, and one of them was arrested in that footage that we saw quite brutally. So it does seem to be spreading. There's a sense of that these airline staff are somehow beyond the law and can enforce their own political views and intimidate everyday Jews, Israelis, based on their anti-Semitic political agenda. It's really a sign of how far we've come along the line of anti-Semitism in the past couple of years.
Well, you're absolutely right, and it's also, there would be many people on that plane who weren't even from Israel, and of the people who are on that plane from Israel, we know that many people disagree, for example, with the way Benjamin Netanyahu is directing this war, because guess what? Israel is a democracy and people have different views, and holding people responsible simply because of their nationality or ethnicity is exactly the same as people saying, well, you're from the United Kingdom, everything Keir Starmer does you must completely agree with because you're from the United Kingdom and he's the leader of the United Kingdom, therefore everything the state does in your name is absolutely what you believe. I mean, I do worry about this. I worry about people in positions as sensitive as those who have air traffic controllers feeling that politics or their political beliefs have anything whatsoever to do with their job.
Yeah, I think we need to not dance around this, Peter. I think we need to call it what it is. It's racism. Yeah. People are so sensitive about all different types of racism in modern culture, whether it's blackface on TV or microaggressions or whatever it is, you know, Mexican hats. But when it comes to Jews, this kind of open racism is allowed to pass because it simply adopts the language of anti-Zionism or political stances or whatever. That's just a mask. What it is the oldest hatred. It's hating Jews because they're Jews. Jews are familiar with it for the last 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years. It's nothing new to us. We know it when we smell it and we know it when we see it. everybody else seems to be engaged in this project of denying it, covering it up, downplaying it, and meanwhile being hypersensitive to all other kinds of racism. There's double standards here that unfortunately represent a real rot at the heart of our society.
Jack, I wonder if I could ask you about another story you'll undoubtedly have an opinion on. The fact that so many people who were arrested to be as part of Palestine Action, they were holding signs saying that they supported Palestine Action at the weekend. There were over 500 arrests that the Metropolitan Police did. Not a single person is going to be charged. What do you make of that?
I think it was a very difficult policy to put in place in the first place. This idea that Palestine Action is now a terrorist group and everybody supporting it is guilty of terror offences, because the government had acted so late in the day that allowed this problem to get so out of hand by turning a blind eye to support for terror on our streets week after week, to radical groups doing what they want. And only after there's this great groundswell of legitimate, sort of, we've turned a blind eye to this activity, suddenly we're taking draconian measures against this particular group after it attacked, of course, those RAF planes on that
Bryce Norton, yeah.
And so I think that it's a difficult thing to enforce when you've been doing the opposite to enforcing it for a couple of years, and the police are really suffering. The volume of people they're seeking to arrest and prosecute is so high, they can't really cope with it all. They're too busy policing our Twitter and our Facebook and arresting people for catcalling.
Makes perfect sense. Jake, thank you. That's Jake Wallace-Simons there. He's author of Israelophobia, the newest version of The Oldest Hatred and What to Do About It. Thank you for joining us on Talk. We're still waiting for Donald Trump. Is that him in the Oval Office there that I'm seeing? No, not just yet. We will, of course, come to him very, very soon as he is... Oh, we're getting the feed now. I think we're just a little bit behind in terms of getting it. Let's cross to the Oval Office now. Donald Trump, the President of the United States.
Thank you very much for being with us. It's a good time for this country, whether you have the hottest country anywhere in the world. I think you're hearing it from a lot of people, not just from me. We're doing very well in so many ways. And the gentleman on my right, we recruited him. We tried to get the best person. We got a man that you'll hear in a second has done an amazing job with respect to Social Security. He's running it, and he's running it like nobody ever even dreamt possible. And it's the 90th anniversary right now of Social Security. So today we celebrate that 90th anniversary of one of the most significant pieces of legislation ever signed into law, the Social Security Act of 1935, and we're going to make it stronger, bigger and better, really doing a job. In the campaign, I made a secret pledge to our seniors that I would always protect Social Security, and under this administration, we're keeping that promise and strengthening Social Security for generations to come. You keep hearing stories that in 6 years, 7 years, Social Security will be gone, and it will be if the Democrats ever get involved, because they don't know what they're doing. But it's going to be around a long time with us. Very much, you'll be surprised to hear some of the numbers. I'm delighted to be joined by the Commissioner of the Social Security Administration, Frank Bisignano, who in the world of business, in fact, I wrote some of the little things down, that he's had an amazing, he was Chief Operating Officer of JP Morgan Chase. He worked for Jamie Dimon. And Jamie Dimon said that he was amazing. So think of that, Chief Operating Officer, J.P. Morgan Chase, had a storied career. Then he went to First Data. For those in the business, you'd know it's the largest payment company anywhere in the world. And worked for Henry Kravis, and it was in big trouble. He took it over as CEO. He made it incredible. They merged with Fiserv, and he became CEO of that, and that became extremely successful. I was in Milwaukee. I guess they have the Milwaukee Arena, and where we had some good success and some good speeches. But he's a really legendary guy, and he wanted to do this. I mean, he just wanted to straighten out Social Security because he loves our country. And what he's done in a few months is amazing. Almost 60 million American seniors rely on Social Security for peace of mind and a life of dignity and retirement. These Americans paid into the system, and they deserve leaders in Washington who are going to protect the benefits they've had and protect Social Security. Under Biden, Social Security went down like nobody's ever seen it, deteriorated. There's never been anything like it. The 4 years of Biden were very, very destructive. It couldn't have gone on much longer. Social Security was going to be destroyed. It was being destroyed. The average call wait time reached an all-time high of more than 42 minutes. Field office wait times were at 32 minutes, which is unheard of, and the disability claims backlog was the longest ever.
So the president's speaking about Social Security there. I'm sure he'll say something about Alaska and the summit there at some stage, but he's talking about the anniversary of Social Security. We're going to go to a break now. We're going to monitor what the president says. If he says something about the Alaska summit, which is of course to do with the Ukraine, where he's going to be meeting Putin, we'll tell you exactly what he says and we'll bring it to you. But for the meantime, we're going to go to a break. We'll keep up with what President Trump is saying, and we'll have more in the programme between now and 7. Your opinions, of course, and a peek inside the Sun too. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
President Trump is speaking in the White House, in fact in the Oval Office, about the 90th anniversary of Social Security. I expect he'll say something about the Ukraine summit happening in Alaska tomorrow. We're listening across it behind the scenes. We're not going to bring in the Social Security stuff. It's about the 90th anniversary of Social Security. I don't think it's that interesting or that relevant, to be honest. But if he starts talking about what the Ukraine summit, we will of course bring that to you. I expect, as he usually does, he will take questions from reporters. We'll let you hear that as well. We are keeping across it and our team behind the scenes is listening to it. But for the meantime, we're going to speak to Alex West, who's Associate News Editor at The Sun, about what's in the paper tomorrow. Alex, great to talk to you. Thanks for taking the time. No doubt you will be talking tomorrow or writing tomorrow about the eyes of the world on Trump and Putin's summit in Alaska, looking ahead to that because it happens at 8:30 tomorrow night.
That's right. I mean, this is really a sort of clash of the titans, isn't it? I mean, this is a huge bombshell meeting. They've spoken on the phone before, but really now we're going to see what happens when they actually meet up in Alaska tomorrow. There's a lot at stake, and there's various different angles here. You've got to understand, you know, what is happening. Why is Putin prepared to meet now? And, you know, is it going to be straightforward? I think Trump has already said they're not going to come away with a deal today and that there'll be another meeting in due course. But what is interesting is, you know, do their sort of aims align? Putin is in a very strong position in Ukraine at the moment. He's taken more territory today. The civilian casualties there are the highest of any month they have been since the start of the war. So the war machine is grinding on, and he continues to keep Ukraine on the back foot. Now, does he use this opportunity to sort of blindside Trump and try and get deals on nuclear disarmament and mineral deals and business deals, tries to get sanctions removed and that kind of thing. And I think there is some fear here that Trump could be being drawn into the spider's web and may come away without the deal that he wants and a deal that Putin wants. But this is why it's going to be so crucial. Anyway, we've got all that in-depth analysis in the paper tomorrow. But I mean, it is a fascinating. It's like two sort of big heavyweights going into a boxing ring for the first time after a huge amount of hype. So we shall see what happens with that. As I say, all eyes on that tomorrow.
Certainly, and not just tomorrow's paper, but I'm sure Saturday's as well. You've more on the TikTok migrant as well. Tell us about that.
Well, this is an extraordinary story. We had a splash in the paper 2 days ago about a migrant, small boat migrant, who had come across and had shown the whole journey on TikTok, live streaming him crossing the channel. Then when he arrived in the hotel, thousands of viewers, all, and him saying to them, "This is so easy, this country is so great, you should all do this, you should all come here," which is just the sort of thing that the government is trying to aim to crack down on, to try and stop these people producing these videos, encouraging more to do it. However, we can reveal tomorrow that this bloke is actually a very nasty misogynist who has spoken on TikTok about if his wife cheated on him, how he would murder her, how he would do that, by explaining that he would get drunk and explain that, he would get these 7 years and in prison he would be able to learn things, and that way he could get rid of his wife.
It sounds like a really nasty piece of work, and he's the person giving these people tips to get across the channel as well. I mean, I don't want him anywhere near my country.
Absolutely, and the comments were so awful that people in Germany who spotted our front page have been in touch with us and said this bloke is already in trouble in Germany. He'd spent 3 years there before he decided he wanted to come to England. He's been put up in the Crown Plaza whilst he waits to go to another asylum hotel, and he's been saying to people, this is a great country, all come here, because it's you're treated like royalty effectively. So yeah, I mean, read the paper again tomorrow. It's stuff that will really get the readers, really get them going, I think.
Let's talk as well about Mounjaro. Prices in the UK could double when the Fat Jobs manufacturer hikes pharmacy rates next month. There are a lot of people who pay for this privately, a number of people making the sacrifice because they want to be thinner, of course. There are questions about its long-term viability and also side effects, but certainly the company, Eli Lilly and Co, says it's going to increase British prices to the rest of Europe. But we've had a bargain here in the UK for quite a while in regard to this, but things are changing, aren't they, Alex?
That's right. I mean, it's bad news for those people who are getting those fat jabs for weight loss. I mean, those people who are getting it on the NHS for obesity, they've cut a deal, this American firm, with the NHS, so they'll continue to get it at a lower rate. Well, they're not prepared to say what that is. And there has been a deal in place up until now, but from September, they're going to pass on those costs. And it's going to add more than £100 a month to people who are prescribed on it privately through pharmacies. So yeah, I mean, the markup normally costs buyers 150 quid, and that could surge to more than 300, so more than double the price. But more and more people are going on to this. It's being recommended for all sorts of things. Apparently it beats cancer.
Yeah, it's a sort of wonder drug, but there are so many different worries about it as well. You talked about huge sort of heavyweights in battle in regard to Putin and Trump previously. I wonder what you make of this Wayne Rooney versus Tom Brady spat as well. Wayne Rooney has hit back.
Well, yeah, poor Wayne, obviously, while he was the sort of beleaguered manager of Birmingham, where he hadn't done very well. He hadn't done very well at Derby before that. Tom Brady, who bought 3%, who you may know is this very famous NFL superback, the most successful sportsman of all time, possibly won, many Super Bowls, all these prizes, incredibly successful chap. So he came in, waltzed into Birmingham City, and Rooney wasn't there at the time, sort of said, well, I don't like his work ethic very much. And said that on an Amazon documentary. That was 3 years ago, but it's obviously still pained Wayne, because he's now come out on a podcast. He now is obviously doing punditry for Match of the Day. He's come out on a podcast to say, well, it was a bit unfair of Tom to say that. He doesn't really understand football. But I think maybe the lady doth protest too much, potentially.
Yeah, in terms of Wayne Rooney as well, I mean, I think I have an idea why the BBC chose him for Match of the Day, which is that I don't think he's ever, in any of the time that I've been aware of Wayne Rooney, had any political views on anything. So I think that was perhaps...
You're not going to get in the same danger as they did with
Lineker. Yeah, absolutely. Alex, listen, thank you. That's Alex Wester, the Associate News Editor at The Sun, taking us through the stories that are going to be in the paper tomorrow, so you can pick up your copy. We are still monitoring this event in the White House. They're still talking about the 90th anniversary of Social Security. Don't know about you, I'm not that interested in that. I am definitely interested in what President Trump will have to say about the Alaska summit. We will come back to that in just a second. We are monitoring it. We'll take your calls as well before 7 if we can, if there's time, and Kevin O'Sullivan will be here between 7 and 10. Stay with us.
People you meet when you go into the camps in France, these people smugglers, these are just jumped up gangsters. Yeah. They're not like criminal masterminds. No. Like, you can find these people within minutes when you walk into the camps. Right. These people just need to be arrested. And you've got to deport all of the migrants when they come into our country. It's really as simple as that. You don't need to spend billions and billions. You don't need to change the law so you can use counter-terrorism powers to go after these people. It's actually relatively simple.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Trump's still talking about Social Security. Let's just dip into what's going on in the Oval Office at the moment. I suspect he will talk about Ukraine in a second.
How about the questions for Frank?
For
Frank?
President?
Yes, on Social Security.
Please.
First and foremost, this was a major campaign promise that you had for 2023. It was one of the first Agenda 47.
So he's taking questions. No doubt there'll be quite a few on Alaska. I'll just read out a couple of messages. Aidan says, getting fed up of these anti-Trump commentators slating his efforts over Ukraine. So far he's brokered peace deals between Thailand and Cambodia, Armenia and Azerbaijan, and put the Iranians back in their box. What exactly did the previous Democratic administration do? Oh yeah, the disgraceful short notice withdrawal from Afghanistan, that says Aidan. Aidan, I'm with you on that, and I do think that if you go back to the previous administration, if Obama, for example, had spoken to North Korea, he'd got probably another Nobel Peace Prize. Nobody knows what he got the first one for. Margaret in Birmingham says, another great speech by President Donald Trump. What a strong leader. Good luck tomorrow in Alaska, Mr. President. We will go to the Oval Office as soon as he starts saying things about Alaska and about Ukraine. In the meantime, I'm going to go to America, another part of America, Michigan, to Cindy, who is in Pigeon in Michigan. And Cindy, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Lovely show, Peter, as always. I watch you all the time. Yeah, I want to say I'm so proud of our president, and I feel that things are going to go well. After all, he is going to offer Putin some money-making ideas, I've heard. So Putin likes that. I feel this, with the second meeting that's going to happen, if anybody is going to, shall we say, blow it, I hate to say this, but it's going to be Zelensky. I'm sorry. I feel like he's never really happy with any terms.
Although he would argue, certainly, he would argue, Cindy, certainly, his country was invaded, and if there are terms, if there's a compromise, well, that's giving in to Putin to some degree. What do you make of that argument?
But yeah, here's where I strongly draw the line. Putin has always said, if you bring in NATO, it's on, meaning I'm going to fight you. And what has Zelensky been trying to do all along? Bring in NATO. So he's totally going off what Putin has always said he did not want. So, and that's like bringing in all your buddies to the fight.
What is the sense in America where you are, Cindy? Do people care about this issue? You obviously care. You care enough to pick up the phone, but when you're talking to friends and family and so on, is peace in Ukraine a big issue for them, or are there bigger things?
It is a big issue, and where I stand, especially how I support Trump, in all honesty, I personally have had love losses here with my friendships of I'm talking 28, 29 years friendships. I've personally lost because I believe in being honest and stating who I feel passionately about. And when you're that good of friends with people, you should be that open and honest and out the window it went.
That must be very, very difficult for you, because
it is.
Surely a part of friendship is respecting difference as well.
Right, and I love to. I don't argue. I like to have freedom to have a conversation and also agree to disagree. But some people, and I will say, this is my experience. Democrats, my friends, have said to me lots of things, and one of them has been the famous line is, "I feel we've grown apart." That's their way of ending things. And I if that's the way people are going to be, so be it. I can't change them, and I have to accept what they've put on the table. But I much prefer to be able to have friends these days in my older years, I'm 53, where we can talk about things.
I think the big one in this country was Brexit. I know someone who, a friend of mine who had someone she knew, a friend of mine who's pro-Brexit, a Leaver, who was at a party. She saw someone, she embraced her. "Oh, how wonderful to see you." And she said, "Isn't this Brexit awful?" And my friend said, "Well, no, I actually voted for it." And the person she was talking to, who was a friend of hers, hadn't seen her in a few months, said, "Well, actually, I'd rather have a discussion, I promise you," she said this, "I'd rather have a discussion with a paedophile than someone who voted for Brexit." And I just thought, get a grip. What a horrendous, offensive, ridiculous thing to say. I mean, these ideas, these arguments, have the arguments, but just, you know, don't completely say that people are morally completely wrong if they disagree
bankrupt,
with you. Yeah,
right.
exactly.
Morally bankrupt you are if you disagree with someone. But I love talk. I want to say I care about your country. That's why I watch talk more than, and I love the interaction. And I watch your station above the American station. So I don't have a station I can just phone in. Ring in.
Well, you're welcome to phone in anytime, Cindy, and I appreciate you doing so today. That's Cindy in Michigan there. Thank you for your very warm call. Let's just hear a little bit more of what President Trump is saying.
The people here, most of you live in D.C., you are petrified to go out, and you're liberal, and if you're liberal, you're going to have to change. You're Democrats, you're going to have to change your ways. So we will have crime under control very shortly in D.C., but they're record numbers, and sadly what I guess the mayor did, but whoever it was, they asked the numbers to be fudged so that it would show less crime than the fact. The fact is it's worse than it's ever been, and we will have it just like we did at the border, where with borders are totally in great shape right now, the best ever, record-setting shape. We'll have the crime situation solved in D.C. very soon. And we're also going to beautify the city. We have a beautiful city, but you can't have graffiti, and you can't have roads with potholes, and you can't have the medians, the dividers in the roads falling down on the street. We're going to be beautifying the city, making it really beautiful. We're going to be getting the criminals the hell out of here. We don't want the criminals in Washington, D.C.
Mr. President, one on your Putin meeting and then one on D.C. crime. Are you prepared to offer Vladimir Putin access to rare minerals to incentivize him to end the war?
We're going to see what happens with our meeting. We have a big meeting, and it's going to be, I think, very important for Russia, and it's going to be very important for us, and important for us only that we're going to save a lot of lives. Look, we have, you know, we're not paying any money, as you know, to Ukraine. We're supplying equipment. We're being paid 100% plus for that equipment by NATO. And I got NATO up from 2% to 5% of GDP. They now have billions of dollars. NATO is a very rich group of countries, and we make the best military equipment anywhere in the world by far. And they're buying our equipment, and they're paying 100% for the equipment, 100%. In fact, they owe us about $2 billion now. They're going to send a check. Another one was sent recently for $1 billion. So we're not spending any money anymore. Biden gave them $350 billion, got nothing for it. And if you look, and by the way, we also signed a rare earth deal where we get, you know, years of rare earth to get our money back, the money we spent. But what I'm really doing this for is to save thousands of soldiers a week. You have Russian soldiers, you have Ukrainian soldiers, and then you'll have missiles dropped into various cities and towns in Ukraine. And they're losing last week they lost 7,251 people, mostly soldiers, Russian and Ukrainian soldiers. I'm doing it for that reason. We have a meeting with President Putin tomorrow. I think it's going to be a good meeting, but the more important meeting will be the second meeting that we're having. We're going to have a meeting with President Putin, President Zelensky, myself, and maybe we'll bring some of the European leaders along, maybe not. It's I don't know that it's going to be very important. We're going to see what happens. And I think President Putin will make peace. I think President Zelensky will make peace. We'll see if they can get along. And if they can, it'll be great. You know, I've solved 6 wars in the last 6 months, a little more than 6 months now. And I'm very proud of it. I thought the easiest one would be this one. It's actually the most difficult. We had one war raging, as you know, for 37 years. One in the Congo with Rwanda was raging for 31 years. We solved 6 of them, made peace, not just solved them, we made peace. If you look at Pakistan and India, that was, planes were being knocked out of the air. 6 or 7 planes came down. They were ready to go. Maybe nuclear, we solved that. I thought this would be maybe an easier one. It never made sense, this war. It would have never happened when I was president. If I were president, this war would have never happened. But millions of people have been killed. And I'm there for one reason, to see if I can solve. This was Biden's war. This isn't my war. I want to see if I can stop the killing. Yeah.
Rare earths, do you plan to offer him access to that at all?
We have great rare earth We made that as payment for all of the money that we've spent so foolishly in Ukraine. We spent $350 billion. Now, Europe spent $1 billion. That's a lot of money. They spent $100 billion. That's a lot of money. But we shouldn't be spending a lot more money than them, and they understand that. And I think that's maybe why we're not spending money anymore. We're not spending any money. They're paying us for everything. So people are shocked when they hear it. They don't even understand. They don't even write about it. But we're not spending money, but we are spending a lot of time trying to get the war solved. If we can get the war solved, we'll be very happy. As far as rare earth, that's very unimportant relative. I'm trying to save lives.
And on DC crime, sir. On DC crime.
Do you have a message for the Democrat lawmakers like Nancy Pelosi or media who are saying, after living here for many years, that there is no crime and you're trying to start a new news cycle?
It's another reason why the Democrats lost the election in a landslide. They lie. It's just lie. Look, the crime is very bad. I think they'd be much better off saying, we want to help President Trump with the crime because it's an epidemic. It's a tragic situation. It's the worst it's ever been. And we want to help President Trump with the crime, as opposed to, he's a dictator. He's a dictator. People are so happy to see our military going into D.C. and getting these thugs out. As you know, we arrested a lot of people yesterday.
Well, that's President Trump speaking in the White House. He did talk about Alaska. The new line in that is that European leaders may be part of the second meeting. It's not just Zelensky. He says he might have European leaders as part of that. We'll bring you right up to date on all of that. No doubt it is part of Kevin O'Sullivan's programme between 7 and 10. On the other side of the news, Kevin, what's coming up?
I think with this business with Trump, I think Trump, he'd love it if he could get some peace, if he can organise a ceasefire and then maybe a permanent peace deal after that. But really, I think mainly, he's not an idiot. He knows Putin's likely to swing a wrecking ball through all of this. Zelensky won't see any territory, so it'll all break down. And at that point, as J.D. Vance said earlier this week, America will be ready to walk away. So Trump will say, I've done everything I could. I put every effort into it. We're out of here. It's now Europe's war. So that's my view on that. We'll be talking about, obviously, the BBC, the world according to the BBC, the migrant